I might be live streaming and just staring awkwardly at the computer right now. Looks like I am. Let's see if it plays and if we have volume or audio. Let's see. Waiting for it. Yep, there we go. Okay, we are live. Good morning for those. I know some of you are up super early this morning. Wow, you are dedicated. I'm up that time painting, but it's because I haven't gone to bed yet usually. So today I am working on a Fredrix. This one is a Belgian linen board. And one of the things I want to point out about these, now I will say the Fredrix are the best canvas boards I've used, but they always say non-warping. I don't know that's a super fair claim. They can warp a little bit. This one is one I personally bought years ago. Now, part of that is going to be on how I stored it. It probably was not stored perfectly, you know, as flat as it should be. But mine, I don't know if you can really see this, but mine is slightly warped. So I thought it was a good thing to use for this project because I don't really care. I mean, this isn't one I'm going to be trying to submit into galleries or anything like that. So, for teaching purposes, I thought it was perfect, but just be aware of that is something whenever you're working on a canvas board, they can warp depending on the humidity, depending on different factors. They can definitely still warp even if you are using the best of canvas boards. So if it's something, I mean, okay, sometimes I like to use canvas boards anyway, just because I like the results that I get. They tend to be a little bit smoother than a stretched canvas, but just be careful of that and watch that. Once it's put into a frame, an open frame, it'll be flat. It won't be a problem. And it's super minor. No, tomorrow, thank you. I don't need to record this one since we're just live streaming this one straight out today. But, yeah, but with the canvas boards, just be aware of that. And I know the ones I've bought some at Hobby Lobby or Michael's that were on clearance or sale or whatever, thought, oh yeah, I can save money. They're good for practice, but I would not necessarily recommend putting something, especially in those ones do warp really bad. But with the Fredrix ones, normally they don't warp, but I mean, this is an example. It still can happen. So just be aware of that when you're choosing your canvases. But I do like these it's super smooth, and especially this one being the Belgian linen. I almost feel like I'm cheating today because if you work on regular canvas, or even a regular canvas board, the paint is going to glide on this in a really nice way, which is one of the reasons I love the linen so much. But I figured this would be good because I can't sell this I wouldn't feel comfortable selling this canvas board. It's minor. Most people probably wouldn't notice, but I'm neurotic about selling like the best of the best. So let's go ahead and moving on. So the first thing that we're going to do is fade our background from brown up to black. Now, I think I was reading, who was it? Somebody said that they had to paint their background first because they couldn't deal with the hair dryer because people are sleeping right now. You don't have to paint it the way that I'm going to. If you did one solid color, that works too. Not a big deal. But what I'm going to do, and this is going to take me 2 coats, and actually, I'm going to simplify it. I'm just going to do, to start with, dark brown, so I'm not fighting the white of the canvas anymore, and then I'm going to do the fade. So the brown that I'm using, I think I said in the thing I was using Van Dyke brown. Apparently I don't have that. That's an oil painting color. I mix up the names of my colors constantly. This one is burnt umber. It doesn't matter which brown you use. Oh, I didn't even pull up my reference photo. I guess I should get that. 1 second. I knew I was forgetting stuff. And my computer is going super slow right now for some reason, so give me just a second. Okay, there is our reference photo. I can almost guarantee you I'm missing a bunch of stuff that I probably need today just because I'm having one of those mornings. Yes, it's 2 p.m. here and it's morning to me. Come on, blow up. Okay. Oh, that is, hold on. Apparently, I was not nearly as ready as I thought it was. Okay, so to start with, like I said, I'm just going to do this straight brown. Now, this brown isn't super opaque. I may mix in, let's see, I'm probably going to mix a touch of black in with it just to make it a little bit darker. Probably should have grabbed a new tube of paint here. Come on. When I put out my oil paints, come on. when I put, and there's plenty of paint in this tube, I just need to set it up right. But when I put on my oil paints, I always put it in the same place every time. I don't typically do that with acrylics because they seem to be more obvious what the color is. With oils, I have a, why is this moving? With oils, I have a problem with it occasionally. What? Stop trying to move on me, screen. My screen is like bouncing up and down. What are you doing? Hold on, I'm going to refresh this because that's going to be distracting. Whoa. Okay, I guess it's reloading. What is going on? Whoa, my computer is freaking out on me. Hold on. What in the world? This is going to take just a second because my... my computer is doing something it is not even... What is going on? I may have to restart the stream, and if I do, I'm sorry. It is like freaking out. I've had this happen before with the touchscreen where it starts, I've had to restart the, not the whole computer, just the windows that it starts freaking out like buttons are being pushed that aren't. I only use this computer for live streaming, so I don't really worry about it being hacked. It just keeps trying to, I'm going to have to refresh this. If I disconnect right now, I am so sorry. I will be right back. Wait, did it stop? Nope. This may screw this up. Be right back. I'm going to have to restart altogether. Shoot. Come on. What are you doing? Okay, let's see if this is working. I might be back. I'm basically watching myself right now on this to see if it fixed. Come on, computer. What does the live control room say? It thinks I'm still streaming. I'm probably going to have to fix it. Okay, good. I think we're back. Sorry about that. Hold on. I have to fix up. I ended up having to restart the computer. I've had that happen with this computer once before where it's like the touch screen and the touchpad started fighting with each other and both trying to push their own buttons even when I wasn't touching anything. Don't know why. And the only way that fixes that is to restart the whole computer, which was a challenge because it wouldn't let me get to the thing. It was a mess. So give me 1 second. Let me fix the cameras because it's going to want to autofocus again. And I don't want it to do that. So we've got the easel camera. Let's edit that. And hopefully we won't have any more problems with that today. That was annoying. I haven't had that happen during a live stream. I've just had it happen when using the laptop in general. When I first got it, it did that a couple of times. Let's see, focus. We will turn off that and apply. And let me fix the, let's see, which camera is this? Sorry about the late start. I know, especially with you guys having to get up early, those of you who did, you could have been asleep for another few minutes. I hate when this happens. Let's see. Okay, I think we are good. Maybe, hopefully. Sorry about that. That is just, always really annoying. But we're lucky because I didn't have to start a whole new live stream. It continued from this one, so yay. Okay. Back to the color. So I'm going to mix a little bit of black in with mine. And the reason for that is this brown. This one is the burnt umber. It's very similar to the Van Dyke brown I think I listed as apparently a color none of us own. But this is going to make it a little bit more opaque so I can cover the white better. Now the reason that I want to cover the white really well for my first layer without worrying about blending is it's going to save me so much time versus trying to blend evenly, that fading from brown up to black, than there we go, get a new brush. going to mix some water with it, but it will save a lot of time because I'm not fighting with the white of the canvas. So let's darken that up a bit. I just want a dark color. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't, none of this really is a big deal. I know a lot of people like to really worry about their colors. Which color to use? I have to use the exact same color. You don't. You want to worry about your values. How light are your lights? How dark are your darks? That is what's going to make a difference. Now I am going to be moving that brush side to side this way. That way if I have streaks, it just looks like the wood grain in the table. You don't want to go this way because that won't make sense. But see how light this is. So this would be a bit of a challenge. And Liquitex Basics tend to be more translucent, which is great for me because I glaze so much, but for something like this, when you're trying to get your background color, that can be a bit annoying. So let's just simplify it and get a nice solid color first. I don't care if there's too many streaks. I want to get rid of the major ones, but I mean, if there are a few, it's not a big deal at this stage. You see, I'm not worried about it being like this perfect shade. I don't need to mix the same exact color that I had for that upper section. I just need it to be dark and solid. Now, I will get rid of some of these brush strokes in just a minute. And you can use a larger brush, but because I'm live streaming, I usually rinse my larger brushes in the kitchen sink. I don't want to have to keep walking over there to do that. So this one is a little bit smaller than I would typically probably use to fill in a background. I've got too much water. See how this is almost, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's starting to almost separate or kind of run. I have way too much water in my mixture, so I need to use more paint. Oops, let's go with more brown. This is the other really negative side with canvas boards is when you're getting your edges, you don't have the edge to grip to like you would a stretched canvas. With those, you can just grab the edge. I'm just going to be messy here, and I'll straighten out my, there we go. Now I can get my streaks going the right direction. Want to make sure I've got all the paint and all those little nooks and crannies of the canvas. Making sure, actually, that I keep moving the canvas. I don't want to not be on camera for you guys. We're good. Okay. So once that's on there, I'm going to take a mop brush. I'm going to come back to clean that in just a second. But we have a dry time issue because it's acrylic, so I'm taking my mop brush, which is actually the Precision Beauty powder brush. And I'm going to go in all directions here. And I'll have some streaks. It's not that I'm getting rid of all of them, it's that I'm softening those out. Now, if it gets to where I'm starting to pick up too much paint on the mop brush, I'm going to take a clean paper towel, and I'm just going to rub some of that off. You can see some of it is coming off. This brush only really works if it's super clean and dry. When it starts to pick up too much paint, then it is not going to work too well for you. And for me, I'm picking up extra paint because I used a bit too much water on that base coat. Oops. So let's just get rid of some of those strokes. Like I said, some will still show. That's fine. It actually just kind of, it's almost like cheating. I'm getting some extra wood grain in there already. Why is that sticking? That's weird. I don't know what happened there. Chunk of dried paint on there. Let's just get that out. Okay, so that is smooth enough. Now, to rinse this brush, I'm only going to dip the tips of the bristles in my water. I'm not dipping the whole brush because that's going to take way too long to dry, and I've only got paint on the tips. So I only need to dip the tips in there, and then I'm going to rub that in circles on a paper towel. Get that nice and clean, or mostly clean anyway. Let's grab another paper towel. That one's already pretty saturated now. But you always want this brush dry and ready to go. And I recommend having a few because if you realize that this is too wet but you still need to blend stuff out, you want to be able to grab another one really quickly. And for acrylic paint, I really prefer all of these. This one is a Real Techniques one. Any of these powder brushes, and I like ones that have longer handles and are really lightweight. I like those better than the art brushes because the art brushes shed so badly. Okay. So this needs to dry. While that's drying, this is when I go and clean the brushes up. But I want to get that ready to go and blend it as much as possible. So this brush now needs to be clean. Now, if you want your water to stay cleaner longer, wipe the paint off the brush onto a paper towel separately before you rinse in your water well. That will allow that water to stay a bit cleaner. Now, that water can be pretty dirty and still work, but I can save myself a little bit of extra work by wiping that off first. So I get that brush nice and clean. I'm just gonna dry most of the water off, get the bristles back in order, and then you can just set that to the side to dry. You don't want to keep these upright in a jar or anything like that, because you don't want the water running down into where there's glue holding those bristles into place. You also don't want them to ever dry or sit at all upside down, because that will fray really quickly the edges of your brushes. You also never, I've got a lot of alsos here, don't ever let the brush set in water. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to let it soak. Yeah, that's a great thing to do if you want ruined brushes. Never ever do that. You can, if you need to soak a brush, if you really need it to be clean, use, like I use the Masters brush cleaner. There's another one by, the pink soap works okay. I like the Masters one better. It lasts a lot longer. I feel like I'm getting more value for my money with those. But I can lather it up with soap and water and let that set to the side if I need to soak it. But don't let it just soak in water. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to now use the hairdryer to dry this. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here all day for this. So plug your ears. Now I'm going to let that set for just a minute because, for two reasons. One, I need to make sure it's all the way dry, and sometimes it'll feel dry to the touch, but you'll put another layer on top and it'll lift that first layer off because it wasn't 100% dry. The second reason is the canvas is hot now. It's very, very warm. It's actually probably no longer warped. Yeah, that looks like it's much better in shape from that heat. But when it's warm and you're adding acrylic paint that dries too fast, you're just speeding up the dry time. So I want this canvas to cool off before, and that's not a canvas board issue, that's just painting in acrylics in general. Let it cool before you go on to your next layer. And have some blueberry iced tea. Those are the times you get to stop and have your coffee or tea. So we'll let that set for a few minutes. What I'm feeling for, you can usually feel it's like a little bit tacky if it's not completely dry. You can also look for if it's kind of shiny. Now, right now, because of where I've got the lights, you've got a high glare here, which I'll fix in a second. Well, sort of fix in a second. But, so that's not really the shine I'm talking about. But when this is wet, I mean, one of the things I like about Liquitex Basics, when it dries, it's fairly matte. So, which works great for the techniques we'll be using with either a charcoal pencil or what I'll be using with the tracing and transfer paper. Glossy paint it doesn't work well on. But, so because of that, though, you can also tell just by looking at it if it's glossy. You know it's not dry with this. This is It's still warm. We'll give it a second. I'm so impatient. I hate waiting. This is one of the reasons I love acrylics, because you get to be super impatient and work quickly. With working with oils, you get to a point and you're like, well, I can't do any more tonight. It has to dry. Whereas with acrylics, I could just paint straight for, the whole day and usually get something. I mean, there have been times where I had a big, like 18 by 24 inch canvas. Got it done in one day, because you can sit and just layer on top of layer and then dry it. Whereas like oils, you have that dry time. Not that I don't love oils. I'm working on one now, and it smells amazing in here because of it. Tomorrow said it also gives you time to clean up your tea when you spill it like I did earlier. How was your trip? Sorry about the spilled tea. My trip was good. I'm so glad to be home. When you find stuff out about your siblings and you're like, wow, I thought you were doing really good. And as it turns out, you're not. You're just all drama. And I'm glad. It's times like that I'm really glad I don't live next to them, or some of them are perfect. I love Leanna, the one that you guys sometimes see in the live stream. We're really close, but my other sister, not so much. But my parents, it was great seeing my parents, but even so, I was just so happy to come home and see my husband and my studio assistants and get back to the easel. I'm not a really big person on travel. I really like being home, and I really like being by myself. Okay. So that I'm going to call dry enough. Now, let's be realistic. I am risking lifting some of this because it might need to dry in a couple places a little bit more. I think I'm okay. But if you're ever not sure, go, be cautious and just wait a little bit longer. But it's a live stream, and I don't want to be here all day waiting for paint to dry. Let's see if I can kind of get this. Nope, that made it worse. Trying to get this glare out a little bit at least. Nope, that's making it so I can't see. Okay, we're just gonna have to deal with some glare at the top, because when I get it to where you guys can see better, then I can't see, which is not gonna work out. Okay, gonna put a bit more paint on the canvas. Now usually I don't put a ton of, or on the palette, I don't put a ton of paint out except on my background. That's going to take more space. So let's go ahead. I went and grabbed, while I was restarting the computer, a new thing of black, so we don't have to fight with that. And I'm actually going to mix in, when I get up here, I'm probably going to mix a bit of magenta or violet in with mine. You don't have to. Oh, geez. I may not either. That's empty. Why do I keep things that are empty? Do you guys do that? Like, that is totally empty. Okay, I'm not mixing violet in with mine. Then it's just going to stay flat black. Whoops. Okay, so back to painting. I'm going to start with a light. Now, before I started up here and just worked my way down, because it was essentially supposed to all be the same color. Clearly it's not. But now I'm going to start with the brown and work my way up to darker. It is much easier to go from light to dark than from dark to light. It's hard to lighten things back up. Okay. So I'm adding some water to the paint. You don't want too much. I had a bit too much earlier on. Now, the mop brush, if you have a hard time with your mop brush, if you're using it and you're creating streaks, like I created more streaks in some of these areas than I took away, that's a good sign you have too much water mixed in with your paint. Now, I don't care if I have streaks at this point, but look, now I can worry about blending, and I'm not worrying about covering the white of the canvas. I already have that brown base coat. So this just makes it a little bit easier. Yes, I could have done this in one shot and not done it in 2 layers like this, but this makes it way easier to blend. And I'm going to pull that brown up a little bit higher than where I want the black to start. That way they can layer or kind of blend into each other. Oh, that's awesome, Carla. So see here, I don't even have to blend any of this. It's just, now I've got too much water. Yet again, I can tell because it's like pulling up. Now part of that is going to be the canvas that I'm using. Some, like this one being super slick, it doesn't absorb much. Different gessos, different finishes can absorb the paint a little bit different, but it's not absorbing much. So that's part of why that shouldn't be that much too much water is what I'm seeing. But that's definitely because of the canvas I'm using. So now as I add the black, I just grabbed a scoop of that and see how I'm just going to blend that down so I get this nice soft fade. I'm going to pull mine a little bit further down. Okay, Tamara, I'm really glad it's not just me. I was doing that with makeup earlier today. I'm getting the foundation out. I cleaned out my makeup drawers because I could never find anything, and I finally got sick of it and decided to organize everything. And the amount of like empties that I keep, why am I not throwing that? I threw away so many things that were empty. I need to do that with my paint now. And so now I'm just working straight black. There's probably a little bit of brown just from the palette mixed in with it, but it's pretty much just black for this upper section. Now here's the great thing. I don't even need to use the mop brush. If I was up against the white of the canvas, I absolutely would have needed to blend this out with a mop brush because you would have seen streaks of the white underneath. I don't have streaks of white because I don't have white underneath. I'm working against that. And so I can leave this exactly as it is. You can see these darker bits here and there are like little light areas. Doesn't matter. I'm going to add wood grain anyway. So this is all I need for my base to let it fade like that. Now, like I said, you could just fade brown to black, but you're going to be fighting the white of the canvas and it's going to make your job a lot harder. Let's simplify things as much as possible. That's kind of my goal with everything. I want to save time, but I also want it to be as easy as possible. Like, let's not add extra work. One of the mistakes, I've got to let this dry anyway, so we may as well chat. One of the mistakes that I used to make when I first started painting, I was doing all the underwater scenes where you fade from a light blue down to a dark blue or down into black, whatever colors you're going into. And one of the things that I kept doing was going right against the white of the canvas, and it would be so streaky. When I finally learned, paint a bit like a medium blue first, and then paint on top of that your fade. It just saves so much effort. So rinse that brush out and then lay that to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and dry this now, so plug your ears. We're going to let that cool again. We had a good question from Maya asked, I'm new to acrylic and painting as a whole. How do I know which brush is best for various techniques? Mainly experience. Try one brush. If it's not giving you the results you want, try another brush. But with acrylics, I will almost always, the main brushes you'll see me go for are Taklon bristled filberts. So filbert, it's that rounded tip, not flat. You'll rarely see me use a flat unless I'm trying to do straight edges. More often than not, you're going to see me work with the filberts, and then the Taklon bristle is a type of bristle. Sometimes they're more, let's see if I've got some in here. Sometimes they're more brown, sometimes they're more golden, sometimes they're white. All of those are going to be fine. Wow, this brush is old. That just brought back memories. That thing's about, I'd say, 21 years old. That is an old brush. But anyway, maybe not quite that old, close. But the Taklon bristle works really, really well for acrylics. The exception to that for me are going to be my mop brushes or makeup brushes. If I use a liner brush, I'm going to use a synthetic hog-haired liner. And then occasionally for certain blending techniques that you'll see later, I'll use a more stiff brush. But the main way that you're going to get the hang of that is just by experimenting. Pick them up, try them. And the reason that I usually like filberts more than anything else, and I will be using flats for some of the lines because when I want straight lines, but filberts are great because you don't have as harsh of stop points. If you use a flat brush, and by flat, let me find one. I'm sure I've got some in here. Nope, that's a filbert. Almost all of them in here are filberts. Here. This one's a flat. So there's your flat where it's just straight across. Oh, the one in my hand was flat. Why didn't I just use that? The filbert is that rounded one. But the flat brushes, when you do a brush stroke, you have a really harsh start-stop, like a straight line. And it's easier to get a softer brush stroke with a filbert where it's that rounded tip. Okay, let me grab my drawing. It's stuck on my Wacom tablet. So now normally with the tracing paper, when I draw everything out, I'm going to cut it the same size as my canvas. Only in this case, there's no drawing up front, so I didn't need to waste that much tracing paper. So I'm just going to line that up with the bottom, and I'm going to tape this around the edge. Now, this is another stage where you really want this to be dry. I don't think mine is. That's a little tacky. Let's see if my transfer paper will stick. It might not because I think my paint's not quite set enough. So then when you use the tracing and transfer paper, the transfer paper, as you can see here, I've used this a million times. One package of this stuff will last you a very, very long time. And the one that I like is loew Cornell. I used the one, I forget what brand they carry. Oh, Royal Lang Nickel or something like that. They have it at Hobby Lobby. Hate that stuff. It's like waxy. It doesn't really work well. This one I love. Let's see. Oops, use the other side of my stylus. Okay, that's going to stick just fine. Now, the reason that I want to get my background painted first and not just go into drawing the pumpkins and then painting around them, acrylic dries too fast. By the time I started painting around the details in the pumpkin, it would be dry and I'd have brush strokes everywhere. It is so much easier just to get everything painted out like this and then layer your drawing on top of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick this in here, and I need this to be the size of where, the canvas. I don't need this to be. This can slide around, so I can use a smaller piece and move it wherever I want. But I do want my tracing paper to be taped at the top two edges, not all four, otherwise you can't lift it, you can't move it around, and not just in the middle, otherwise the paper starts to swing side to side and your drawing will not be straight. And I mean, these are pumpkins, they don't have to be perfect. If you want to freehand these with a white charcoal pencil, totally fine too, but I figured this would save some time. If I'm working on like a portrait or an animal where it needs to be more perfect, I will always draw it out first on another piece of paper. I will almost never just freehand straight on. Even if I want to freehand, I'll freehand it onto the tracing paper. Well, I'll freehand it onto another piece of paper and then trace that. I don't like to freehand directly onto tracing paper itself because that you can't really erase, and I do a lot of erasing when I freehand. I don't need these little lines in the pumpkin. I'm going to, make that messy. That's not something that needs to be perfect. So I won't worry about that. And I thought I was going to draw this as the fairy lights where you could see the string going through there. I don't think I'm going to. I'm going to do them as fireflies. I like fireflies better anyway. That's why I like fairy lights. They look like fireflies. So I'm not even going to worry about the string. I'm actually not even going to worry about drawing in where the lights are going to go, since I'm going to just put those in wherever I want. Now, one of the great things if you're using the tracing transfer paper method, you can see I'm just being loose, this does not need to be exact, is that once I paint my pumpkins, if I'm like, oh, I missed a line, but I don't want to freehand it, I can just take the same paper and put it over wherever my painting is. And this is really helpful if you're drawing portraits. So let's say you painted something, you're like, something's wrong with the eyes. I can tell once I started adding paint, they got too big, too small, something's wrong, can't tell what it is. Take your tracing paper, go right back over it, and you can see what came out off. If you knew that your drawing was perfect, whether you traced or freehanded, if you knew that drawing was right to start with, that will be really helpful. I feel like I'm missing something in there. Whatever. Okay, and then I'm going to put the main line here. Give myself a hint of where some of these wood grain areas go. Got the shadow. And that's good enough. I'll just freehand the rest in. Okay, since I don't need that to be perfect. So now these things here, these are just a stylus. You can get them at the art supply store. You can get them on Amazon, or you can buy nail. It's like a nail stylus tool, or look up nail stylus, nail dotting tool, something like that on Amazon, and they're way cheaper. You can get it for like just a couple of dollars versus like $6 or $7 if it's the art supply one, and it's the exact same, only this one has like a rubber grip. So if you like the rubber grip, then go with the more expensive. But the nail ones, which I lost apparently, those ones, I use those for years and they work exactly the same. You can use a ballpoint pen, especially if it's empty. Be careful if it has ink in it, because if you rip through your tracing paper, you could get ink on your drawing. But an empty ballpoint pen works great too. So let's pull that off. First thing I'm going to start with is painting in the wood grain. Oh yeah, I missed a couple spots here. Let's tape this so we don't get rid of that. There is, let's see if I have a white charcoal pencil. I'm missing a line back here. Missing a few lines apparently. Okay. But yeah, this paper, you can see how well the white shows up here when I've used some of the other ones, other brands that I got at art supply store, like the Royal Lang Nickel, and I'm probably saying that wrong. That one, the lines just really weren't showing up. Oh, I'm missing a whole thing here with the pumpkin. Let's see, you kind of go this way, you come out that way. Doesn't need to be perfect. This is why this is such a fun project. It's going to look like pumpkins even if you're missing entire sections. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just start on that wood grain, and this is where I use those flat brushes. Let's see if I can find any that are any good down here. I might need to grab a new one out of the dresser drawer. Oh wait, I think I had a good one up here. You can use a liner brush if you want. I like the flat brushes for this just because it's going to load more. Yeah, here we go. Oh, no, that's a filbert. How did I grab the one? I can make it, here we go. I can make a long line really, really quickly. I've got two that I'm going to, or I can use. One is a Simply Simmons, that is the white one, and then this one is a Royal and Lang Nickel, whatever one. But see how they're flat? These are going to be easy for me to get straight lines going this way with very little effort. I don't have to continuously reload the brush as often as I would if I were using a liner. And I'm just going to use black paint for this. I can come back through and add highlights if I want later. We'll just start with that, and I've got the main line going through here. Now this table is a reclaimed wood, and so these lines aren't perfectly straight. If you were painting or using something that needed really straight lines, like it was really well polished, then you might want to use a ruler or a piece of paper to keep a straight line. Mine are extremely loose anyway, so I don't need a straight line. Now here I got a little bit crazy, having too much fun. So I'm going to take a clean brush. I'm going to just wipe some of that off. It works like an eraser. As long as I do it while it's still wet, I can get rid of some of that. But like I said, this line doesn't need to be straight, but some of that got way too thick. It's hard with my camera in my face to get it at the right angle. If I want straight lines, I like to lay it flat and go on top of it this way, which I don't work too often, but it's easier. Up at the easel, when I've got this in my face, it's very hard to get very straight. So if you want straight, that might be something you want to do. But this is one of the wood panels. And let's see, we've got another one that comes back behind this pumpkin. And then these just all fade out. You're really not going to see much here. I'll just give you a hint of some. And then this one, you really don't see either. I love my reclaimed wood furniture. You just have to be careful because they're really easy to get splinters on. But they have such a nice, like, natural kind of rustic look. Okay, so now I am going to, and some of this I will be doing with a liner, but for some of these bigger sections, I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm not going to worry about the shadows just yet. And I don't need to completely hide the white lines because that I can erase later. Now, I want to make sure, just to keep the perspective right, that these are more long. You don't want like lines going this way. You don't want big details like that are more long. I want them long this way, horizontal, not vertical. That's going to help my perspective look like this stays flat. So see how I do these little arrows and then just connect it through? Your wood grain does not need to be the same shape as mine. Some of these are going to be straight. Some will start having those loops. And I'm using this brush by barely adding any pressure, and that will give me variation in, but well, if I want to push harder, I'm going to get a thicker line. Lighter is going to give me that thinner line. And your wood grain, like I said, it does not have to be like in the reference photo, it's thinner. But I'm just painting how I painted them a million times. So just going to go through this quickly to give us the look of wood grain. If you want to sit there and make super thin lines, then I would probably go with a liner in that case. But this here, this line is not wood grain. This is the separation where one wood plank is meeting another. So that's where that's a deeper shadow. The rest are going to be way thinner than that. Actually, I want to even this out a bit more though. And then that's what this one here is too. The rest of these are the actual wood grain. But this is a deeper shadow. It goes in more on that table. This right on the edge of that cam easel. I really need to get a new easel. Mine, I've got so many layers of paint, it's really rigid and it doesn't sit here nicely. Or when I put it on the edge. Every once in a while I'll take a razor blade to it and just trim off the layers and layers of paint, but I think it's getting to be, this easel is probably, I don't know, about 20 years. It's about as old as that one brush I was all excited about. This one is, this easel is so old. I want to get one that's slightly bigger. So the wood grain is kind of like when you've heard me talk about water when you make your lines, where it's long horizontal, short diagonal, long horizontal. Now this isn't really diagonal. This, when I want the lines that come back, they come all the way back. They curve back this way. But I mean, the curve is very short. If you were looking straight down onto a table, that's different. But because of the perspective, we want to keep these long and horizontal. And this isn't the only color we're going to go through. We're going to come back through and add a few highlights. Some different tones of the wood in between. So see, a lot of long horizontal. And then I can put some little shapes in here. Now as they get back here, this starts to blend out, so I'm not really going to do much. I'm just going to give you kind of a little bit of a hint. There being some that's mostly out of focus. Make sure that line goes over the pumpkin so it looks like it goes behind it. I don't want a little halo effect around it where it didn't quite hit that line. Okay, I'm going to add a few highlights. I'm going to get some unbleached titanium white and mix that in with my brown. That is way too much water. Let's dab some of that off on the brush. Let's get some brown in here. And the whole thing with how much water, that is going to come with the more you practice, the more you try this. It's not something that you magically know unless you do it wrong a million times and realize, okay, too much water or not enough water, but that's going to come with practice. So don't feel like if you hit that point where you're like, I don't know how much, that you just have to paint more. And it's too light. Let's wipe some of that off and get some brown. I'm just going to go in between some of these. Now, if you're going to go photorealistic or, well, more, I'd say, like hyper-realistic, you're going to be more precise on where your highlights go. This is very loose. This is a little bit more of just almost a faux finish. You're making it look like wood, but it's not. I mean, if you look closely, it's like, okay, that's not necessarily that realistic. I'm going to put a highlight here right under that shadow where that plank is. So this isn't the wood grain. This is right under where one plank ends. I'm almost dry brushing this at this point. Dry brushing on a linen canvas that's primed well is very different than dry brushing on a rough canvas. It still looks very smooth. Sounds like I'm trying to sell you guys on Belgian linen canvases, doesn't it? I actually, when you're learning, I don't know that I would recommend spending the money on them when you're just, you know, practicing, because they do cost more. But when you get to where you're really wanting things really smooth and it really matters, then it's worth investing a bit more. But the other thing like you can do is take a canvas that isn't as smooth as you like and put a couple of coats of gesso on it and then sand it down, and that can give you that really smooth. It's not as smooth, but it still will be smooth. And I want this to be subtle. I don't want this to be super like high contrast for the wood grain. I'm just kind of going in between some of the sections that I did with the black. Some, again, thicker, some thinner. Variation is a really big deal. If you start getting it looking too uniform, it doesn't look very realistic. Which is great, because that means you get to be messy. Again, those long horizontal lines. Going to come back through a few of these. Throw some highlights back here, not too many, because I just want that to be out of focus in the back. I'm going to highlight this a little bit more right under that. Now here we've got a bit more of a highlight, which will show more once I put that, and I can come back and add that once I do the, what will probably end up being a firefly. I think I'm still going to put the lights in the same location as the photo, but I'm going to paint them as fireflies, not as a string of lights. Okay, I'm going to rinse that brush. I'm going to load up a bit more of that dark black brown. It's mostly black. There just happens to be some brown mixed into it. It's one of those things, if I just had black, I would use that, but I'm too lazy to mix it separately. So we'll use what's there. Again, it's the contrast. Don't worry. As you can see, I don't worry about the color being exact. I worry about the contrast. Is it dark enough? That matters. So make the line of that wood table stand out a bit more there. Maybe pull a little bit more of the wood grain, and then we're going to let that dry and start on the pumpkins. Actually, we're going to do the shadow of the pumpkins next. And I'm going to use the same brush because it's a small area, so I don't need to worry about the harsh start and stop points here. But we've got a shadow that comes under this pumpkin. It pretty much meets this guy. I need to blow my image up a bit. Now the dark fades. It doesn't go right up to, it's not this whole triangle. So we'll just fill that in. Now generally on a shadow, the inner part of the shadow will be a little bit lighter than the outer ring. So what I'm going to do is rinse that brush so that it's clean, has just a bit of water, and I'm going to lift some out of the center, just a bit. So I've got that darker ring around that edge, but it's not just straight black. Now I'm going to do the same thing. This guy comes out here. There's actually a shadow that goes all the way under him, real thin. Oops, I need a little bit more paint there. I've got too much water, so it's not really showing up enough. There's going to be a light back there, so it'll lighten up some. I'm going to rinse that brush, dry it, and with what's there, I'm just going to smudge that little inside section there. When I first learned to blend, I kept trying to blend everything with a mop brush. Everything. It's not necessary. If you can blend it with the brush in your hand, save yourself the time. So we've got a bit of a shadow under this guy that kind of spreads out here. And I may warm up some of the brown, especially around where the fireflies, or if you want to do it as lights, whatever. I'm going to probably add a orangey glaze to it to warm it up. Right now it's just flat brown. But we'll come to that when we get to that state, or later on. Oops, I've got a little bit too much water there. Let's add some more paint. Still too much water. And we've got a darker shadow back here. Fade up. And I'm going to pull a little bit more of a dark shadow here under this pumpkin. I'm going to thicken that up a bit. And let's define too right under here. And see, this is where I like the flat brushes because it almost is working. It's like a round brush or a thicker liner brush. So while I usually use the filberts, there are times I like these guys. Okay, I'm gonna rinse that off. We're gonna let that set for now and drink some tea. Tamara says, yeah, I'm mad at his fireflies too. Great minds. More Halloweeny. That's what I thought. Well, I'll put fireflies on everything. Like the frog I'm working on, he's going to have fireflies. Everything has to have fireflies in my world. So, okay, for the base of the pumpkins, I'm going to start by painting them. Now, there's a couple ways I can go. I can let some of the brown show through in areas, and that can be part of my shadows, or I can start by just painting them the unbleached titanium white to start with, which is probably what I'm going to do. If you do not have unbleached titanium white, you can use your regular titanium white and just add a bit of brown to it just so that it's not so bright white. That's the whole point there, is we want it to be more neutral. Let's see what brushes I have to work with. And this guy will probably work. It's a little bit large, but we'll use that filbert. I get a lot of brushes. Yeah, this is a Royal Langnickel. I don't know if this one either came from Michael's or from one of my Smart Art boxes. I think this was a Michael's one. I have a bunch of brushes where I don't remember where they came from. Okay, so let's pull some of these brushes out of the way. Actually, we're probably done with at least the bigger one. I want to thin it with a bit of water. Remember, the more water you add, you're doing two things. One, you're making it thinner. Well, you're doing a few things, I guess. You're making it thinner so it flows smoother. But you're also, the more water you add, the more translucent that paint is going to be and the less adhesive. So you have to be careful, because if you're doing like a scrubbing technique on an area that was thinned way too much with water, that can kind of lift off the canvas. Once you varnish it, it's permanent. It's not going, there's a scare tactic video out there. The woman actually had to remove the comments because too many people, I guess, were telling her she was full of it. But they try to, that video tries to make you think if you add too much water and in this percentage and that percentage, and it's just going to flake off over time or peel off. I forget what she worded. It's not. Once it's varnished, it's on there. But I'm going to go ahead, and this brush is a little on the large side, so you may want to go a bit smaller. Will be easier for you. I'm letting that center, that stem be rough. That doesn't need to be solid. You can use a glazing medium if you don't want to use water. And I like that for glazing. I don't like it for most things though. Notice how I'm leaving a little bit of a gap so I can see where that line was, because I'm going to put a shadow there anyway. But you can use a glazing medium. It makes it glossy. It makes it so that like the white charcoal pencil doesn't stick as well. But for glazing, when you're just making those translucent colors, then that gives you a really nice effect. You get more of a glow because it just makes it really pretty. You are free to paint these pumpkins. If you want them to be more orange, you can do that too. I tried when I took the reference photos, I only had one orange. The rest of them are the white or the mixed, like the middle guy. And when I had the one orange out, the balance of the whole thing was really bad with the other white pumpkin. If I had two orange pumpkins for the two smaller ones, it would have worked. But it was a really weird, the balance was off. But if you painted both the white pumpkins orange, that would be cute too. And Carla, you have been taking good care of that brush if you got it to last 40 years. That is impressive. Mine, the one that is like 20 years old or whatever, 25, however old it is, I did not take that good of care of it. It's super stiff. That's back when I had no idea how to take care of brushes. And I used to, all the things that I tell you guys not to do with brushes, like leaving them in cups and all that, that's what I did. And so everything's just really damaged, but it works good for certain smudging and blending techniques. But I was like one of the worst at taking care of brushes. Because I had no idea. No one had ever told me how, and that was well before YouTube, although 40 years old, that's older than YouTube too, so I guess I can't use that excuse, can I? But I remember one of my friends, Jaime Jimenez, who you guys have heard me talk about, he saw my brushes. I'm going to make this go behind that guy a bit more than what I've got it drawn out as. But he saw how my brushes looked, and he gave me quite a lecture on how to not have them get as damaged as they were. He's the one who told me which brush cleaner to use. So I'm doing this a little separate where the orange in the middle is going to go. I'm still going to put the white on there, but this just makes it easier for me to keep track of where it goes later. You know, the whole lazy factor. I like to make things as easy as possible. So now I will fill that in, but I can still kind of see where it went, just to keep track of it. And I'm okay, whoops, I'm okay with some of the brown bits showing through there because I'm going to need dark areas anyway. Same thing here, we'll paint that out separately. Now notice how hard I push with the brush. If your edges are like you're not pushing hard enough and your edges, well, this has enough paint on it, it's not the best example, but if you're having bumpy edges, push a little harder or reload that brush, but add a little bit more pressure and that will give you that crisper edge. Part has to do with the brush, part has to do with how much water, and part has to do with the amount of pressure you're adding. So if one of those things doesn't fix the problem, try one of the others. So letting this be rough. Same thing, rougher, that's going to be orange, but I still have to, I can't just paint orange where the orange goes. I have to put this lighter color down first, otherwise the orange, it's too translucent. You're going to see the brown through it more. It won't really be orange. You'd just be tinting the brown orange. You wouldn't be getting bright orange. So even though I don't want it to be this color, I still need something opaque there first. Make sure that outer edge is smooth. A little bit more rough in here where the orange goes. And if you're having a hard time getting your edges smooth or controlling your brush, switch to a smaller brush. You do not have to use the same size that I am. Use what is comfortable to you. I would still recommend this type of brush, a smaller or a filbert, but I would probably go ahead and go a little bit smaller. Now this is, I'm going to mess with the exposure right now on those pumpkins. The camera is definitely overexposing those. Let's see if I can make that easier. The wood looks accurate, but let's see if I can make that a little bit easier for you guys to see. Darken these up a bit. Ooh, too dark. Hold on. I guess we'll leave that how it is. I think that just darkening it up a bit is a little bit more accurate to what I'm seeing. But my pumpkins are way streakier. The camera is showing this as being just this solid white. It's not. It's extremely streaky, but the streaks are going in the direction of the pumpkin. So that is an unfortunate thing with webcams that hopefully sometime I will be able to upgrade a bit. Let's see. Tamara says, I have a damaged small filbert. It is so handy for blurring edges. Exactly. That's what I like mine for. Out of focus. Only mistreatment could have gotten it to work so well. Yeah, there's some damaged brushes that you just can't buy that they work perfectly for. Carla said, a tip from a former teacher. She washed them thoroughly and then coat them with organic dish soap and left it in. The next time I use it, I rinse it out well and it's ready to go. Yeah, that would definitely work. Unless you're working in oils. Then because you have to use water, so that doesn't work so well. Okay, next pumpkin. I honestly should switch to a smaller brush, but I'm lazy and I'm just going to keep using the same one. I feel like the I'm lazy. It's like the story of my life. What is the easiest way I can make it happen? So yeah, if your pumpkins are a bit streaky, that's totally fine. Mine are too. And I don't even care if the outer edges are exact. They absolutely don't need to be. If I were doing a portrait, everything needs to, things need to be exact. Well, besides hair. But with something like this, it's kind of like flowers. I mean, they grow in such different shapes. No one is going to know the difference. So you get to be a bit more free and not worry about things being so perfect. Samson, you could use that tip with watercolor brushes, but not with oil because they wouldn't be ready to go with oil. With oil, once you rinse it with water, you can't start working with oils right away. So great for acrylics, great for watercolor or like ink tint. Well, damaging a water, it's hard to damage a brush or need it to soak with watercolor or ink tints. There'd almost be no reason to. But with I'm missing a whole line in here. With oil paint, no, don't do that with oils. You could do it like if you had a damage brush and you wanted to let it soak, but you need to rinse that soap out and let it dry completely before you can start painting with it. Whereas with the acrylics, you can rinse them and start right now because we're going to add water anyway to those. But with an oil-based paint, no. I always love this stage of a painting. I feel like I'm starting to get somewhere. Okay, I'm going to rinse that brush. Actually, I'm going to wipe the paint off on my paper towel. Then I'm going to rinse my brush. And drink some tea. Okay, and it's not, but going back to the oil painting brushes, it's not that I don't use the same stuff to clean my oil brushes as I do my acrylics. It's just that they have to dry all the way before you can use them again. Okay, let's start back with this pumpkin. I'm going to actually use the hairdryer to make sure this is all the way dry before I go into the next layer. So plug your ears. Now I am going to switch to a smaller brush. This one is definitely too big for the smaller details. And here I even could use, actually, it's my favorite flat out. No, I don't know where it is. I won't go, oh, this one will probably work okay. Let's see what I've got in here. Now this is a stiff brush. You can see it's really, actually this one is really stiff. But this is what I'll use for a lot of the shading. Just not for applying paint. Too stiff for that. You can, this is what I store my brushes in, or most of them anyway. It's a canvas brush holder. Dick Blick has my favorite of these. If you just look up canvas brush holder, you want the big one. They have two sizes like this. One is a smaller one is a bigger one. The smaller one I use for like my watercolor pencil brushes or like Inktense brushes because I don't have very many brushes for that. But for oils and acrylics, trust me, get the biggest one they have. You will fill it up so fast, especially if you go buy brushes when they're on clearance at Hobby Lobby like I do. Ooh, here we go. Here's a good one. This is a nice sized filbert. That should be much easier to control. I'm going to want a few different brushes I'm going to pull out to get this rough look. I don't think this brush is supposed to go in here. It looks like one I use for makeup or that I bought for makeup. I have a feeling I put it in the wrong place. Let's see. We'll get a couple of little guys out. So let's put these brushes to the side. And I'm going to start with shading. I'm not going to start with tons of detail. I'm just going to start with, actually, I think I am going to use this round brush so that I can get kind of a bumpy, rough look to it. And now I need to get some more colors out. So we've got the red, got some yellow, Does not really matter that much which red or yellow, but the ones that I'm using here, the yellow is cadmium yellow medium hue, and the red is, oh god, I can't say that, naphthol crimson. I don't know, it's kind of an orangey red. A warmer red, which for, in this case, because I'm mixing orange anyway, would be better. Now, Liquitex Basics does make an orange. It's good for glazing, and I may go pull it out when I get to the glazing section. But for actually, if you want something to be orange, or it's too translucent, so I don't use it that often, except for glazing. Now, when you mix red or yellow, or words are hard. If you mix orange, you're going to start by pulling your yellow and then pull a little bit of red. That red is going to want to take over like crazy. So slowly pull reds in. I actually think I do want a violet. Hold on one second. I want to grab a violet that's not empty. That'll work. I want to cool off part of these shadows. I think this will be really pretty. You can do it with just orange, but I'm going to add some violet to mine. Actually, another color that's going to be useful on this one is raw sienna. And you can mix these. Like, you don't have to use the exact colors I am. I just put a brief, like the minimum colors you would need to do this, but I'm going to use some other colors in mine too. So that one is, that's the raw sienna. But I want to add a little bit of the deep violet into that for getting some of these shadows. So I'm going to add this here. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that up and grab a clean brush. Here's another round. And for the highlight, I'm going to pull the, let's see, this area has a little bit of a highlight here, and I'm going to let these blend wet into wet. I don't need it perfectly smooth because this has a lot of texture to it. Fairy Freak said, if you have only worked in charcoal and graphite but wanted to get into painting, would you suggest going straight into something colorful, or would you stick to a more simple palette? Like maybe 5 colors max, counting black and white. So black, white, or unbleached titanium white, whichever you prefer. And then whatever the colors you are, that's going to help you learn to blend your colors in a way that is going to be way too difficult if you're trying to use every color available. I was lucky in that I couldn't afford many colors of paint when I started. I think that's why I can blend so well now, because I learned to blend from very little. You're going to learn a lot more and make it a lot easier on yourself with a more limited palette for sure. See how I'm just letting those blend in, wet into wet? I'm okay with there being brush strokes and streaks there. That is totally okay for this. Have I started the videos on airbrush? Yes, I have. Well, I started the project, and I need to get back to it after I finish this frog in oils. Actually, I may, while the frog in oils is drying. That could be the project that I work on. Wait, hold on. This comes here. This, I'm missing a line. But I need to go back and finish that because I want to do that for reviewing this airbrush. But yeah, definitely. I've already recorded the portions showing you how to clean the airbrush, how to keep it from clogging and all of that. I haven't edited it. God, I'm not going to say that right today. But that hasn't been edited yet. Oh, I got it right that time. I just have to do it faster without thinking. But yeah, so I am working on that and I need to get back to it. That trip going to California just threw everything off, trying to get ready for it and then being gone a week and then trying to get caught up once I got home. Did get your postcards ordered. July, God, I was so behind. July is 2 months behind. August is 1 month. No, actually, August is only 2 weeks late. August is not that late. And then I also ordered October's. But those are coming. I just got the email that they shipped, so I can get those hopefully soon. But I'm trying to get caught up on everything. One more reason, I'm just not a good person for going on vacation. I don't have time for that. I'm just going to let that blend in and then blend out to the lighter white here. I may put a few little streaks here and there. Just letting, this is all wet into wet. Just letting it blend. Doesn't need to be perfect. Yeah, I've got my airbrush sitting below me when I was working on getting the studio back in working order when I got home. I've definitely got the itch to work on that. And see these colors, I don't think you can see on this camera, but they're very translucent, so you can really see the streaks underneath the area you're working on. I'm gonna let that blend in and then blend down to white. And I say white, but this is actually the unbleached titanium white. Like I said, you don't have to buy that paint, but it's one of those colors. I use it more than titanium white. I used to load up on tons and tons of titanium white, but then I was mixing this color, adding either like yellow ochre you can add, or yellow oxide, I think it is in this color, or this brand. Adding a bit of brown, just something to neutralize it. And I finally realized I am wasting time. That paint, I use it so often that it really was worth. Yes, I could mix it, but let's go ahead and save myself some time and buy the stuff. I'm adding more of a shadow on my crease right here. Let's add a little bit more white. That's kind of dark. That's a bit deeper of a shadow than what I want. Get right over that. And see how it's like a little sketchy. I've got little bits in here to create that texture. If you look at your reference photo, it's not perfectly smooth. We want to get some variation in there. And I'm just using this mixture of the red, yellow, and violet. It's a bit too rough. Let's blend that a bit. And then we've got a much deeper shadow. Now, if it's blending too much wet into wet and you're not really getting much contrast, let it dry and you can go back over part of it. Tamara said, we can be patient for postcards. You have to see your mom. Can you tell I'm a mom? Yeah, I love visiting my parents. Like, I can't wait. They usually come out in the spring. They weren't able to last year, but we're hoping they make it out this year. Then I don't have to travel, but I still get to visit my mom. I talk to my mom on the phone every day when she goes on her lunch break at work, sometimes twice a day. She calls me and chats while she's walking. Let's get this a little darker. You guys know me. In this case, more often than not, I like to hype up my contrast. I need a highlight here. Let's see. Whoops. Just pull that a little bit in with my highlight so I can separate that chunk. Okay, next one. I'm going to put the white down first here. There's not a whole lot of the unbleached titanium white as we move on. Maya said, I'm having problems getting shadows blended properly. Is it a scrubbing technique? No, it's what I'm doing is wet into wet. So it's really going to be a matter of how much water versus how much paint is on your brush. And the only way you're going to learn that balance, there's no magic number somebody can tell you. Like it's not a math problem. It's a experience. If it's too runny, use more paint. If it's not blending right, try different things. But unfortunately, I'd love to be able to just give you the instant answer, but it's experience. Paint more. The more you paint, the easier that's going to get for you to find that balance. So as much as it's helpful for you to watch what I'm doing, it's helpful for you to watch other artists for tutorials, books, whatever. But until you paint, until you really experience it on your own, that blending wet into wet that I'm doing here, it's going to be a little bit messy. It's going to be a little bit rough, and that's okay. But no, it's not a scrubbing technique that I'm doing. This is largely going to come down to you've got to practice. And I will tell you right now, blending wet into wet took me a little bit longer to get the hang of than almost anything else with acrylics. Because they do dry fast, because if your brush is too dry or your canvas is too rough, everything impacts it. But until you experience it, and sometimes just experiencing what you don't like, that's how you're really going to get the feel for this. But this is all wet while I'm working. There's small areas, so it's pretty easy to stay wet into wet. Get some little rough bits in there. This is going to need to get a lot darker, so I'll glaze that later. I'm not going to blend it now. This section here, that shadow, and really when it gets into these deeper shadows, because if I do it now, I'm working wet into wet, I'm going to start creating mud. I need that to dry. Tamara said, did you get to take any photos of your old work? I did, and I haven't posted them yet, but I took one. I meant to take more and forgot. I was exhausted while I was there. I had so many plans of things I wanted to do while I was there. I was like, getting posts on Instagram, getting this done, getting that. I just wanted to sleep. I was so tired. Travel, really, I think I blame the fibromyalgia for that. Like anything like that just takes everything out of me. But so I didn't get everything, but I did get at least one. I think I only got the one of a bad old painting, and I want to put it next to like a newer, it was a pet portrait. I need to post that next to a good one because you guys are going to laugh or be encouraged. I mean, just when you see what I used to paint for pet portraits. And the funny thing is I thought I was amazing. It's like, look how good this is, because I mean, I didn't take classes. I didn't think I would hit a stage where anything looked realistic. So at the time I thought it was amazing until I realized, wait, I want things to look more realistic. Let's try harder. Let's put more time into this. But yeah, it's a funny one. I need to post that. I'll post it over on Instagram. It's on my phone. Now these are your base layers. Don't think this has to look like the finished pumpkin. Hold on. My husband wants to know if I want to go see Venom tomorrow. I don't like going to the movies. I'm so boring. I just don't like leaving the house. I just want to stay home and paint or play Warcraft. Okay, I kind of messed up my whatever's going on back here. This is a lot like painting a rose or a flower, something like that, where if your petal's a little off, no one is going to know the difference. I mean, we'll know because we're all looking at the same reference photo, but you're not going to show other people the reference photo usually. There's going to be a dark shadow in here that I'm not going to get that dark until I come back through with more paint later. We've got a nice highlight here. And then we'll blend, just let that, whoops, I've got too much paint there. I'm going to wipe some of that off. So I've got a more dry brush. I'm going to blend that wet paint into wet paint. If I would have left that much thick wet paint on there, I'm not letting that brush blend. So by wiping it off on a paper towel, there's still paint on it, but now it's dry enough that I can blend and just smudge those colors together. I think when you're getting started, like if this is your first time painting or you're just getting started with painting in general, one of the best things you can do for yourself besides practice, besides paint, you know, as any chance you get, is don't be hard on yourself. Don't expect it to look like somebody who's been painting for many years. Let it, you know, make some paintings that you're not super proud of, but that's how you learn. Don't get frustrated and think, oh, I'm just not good at this. I'm not going to do, you know, I need to go back to graphite or whatever. Keep painting until you get the hang of it. You will get it. But don't let it frustrate you, and don't expect too much too soon. I think that takes the fun out of it when you're too worried about it being perfect. And it's always hard too. And I remember one of my friends, her husband did this to her. She first started taking my classes. This was years ago. I'm going to leave that pumpkin alone. We're going to move on to this one. That needs to dry. This pumpkin is not finished, but we're going to just get kind of all of them to the same stage, and then we'll come back. But my friend was taking my classes, and her husband, she'd come home with her work, or, you know, whatever stage she'd be at, the ugly stage. And her husband was like, that looks terrible. That looked, you know, this would be so easy. I could do that, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, all right, here you go. Gave him canvas, gave him the paints. He couldn't do it. And it shut him up. And he was definitely more supportive about whatever stage she was at. And she was a good painter. So, I mean, it was just those ugly stages. But don't let your family ever discourage you, because I've seen that before where people are like, my family thought it was ugly. If you feel like your family members are going to be that way, just don't show them. Wait till it's done until they see things. And I think you can get to where you show them the ugly stage in the future, but when they haven't seen you do something that's a little bit more complete, that can definitely be discouraging for some artists. Jenny said, my 18-year-old son saw the other night and loved it. I'm not sure that's the Oh, wait, I think I'm missing one. Sorry. My 18-year-old son saw that the other night and loved it. I'm not sure if that's the recommendation or not, though. I'm not sure which part of the conversation we're at. There's always a delay on what I say versus when the video plays for you guys and when the comment comes through, so I'm not sure what part of the conversation we were at. I'm sorry. Okay, so this, let's see, we're pretty dark back here. Ooh, that is too yellow. I'm going to add some violet to that. And if you're not using violet, you could just use brown. That's closer, but still too dark. So let's pull our white and we'll just let that blend together. Now it's looking better. That's more what I wanted. I want this to blend, so I'm going to take this brush, which is kind of starting to dry a little bit, but there's still some of the unbleached titanium white on it. And I'm definitely going to need some shadows in here. Oh, Venom. Okay, thank you. You said that he loved it. Not sure that's a recommendation or not. That makes so much more sense. My brain is like always like 10 conversations ahead of wherever I actually am, when it's coming out of my mouth. So I never remember half of that anyway, even if it weren't for YouTube's delay. I like comic book movies overall, so I'm sure it'll be good. I just don't like going to the theater. I should go though, just to make my husband happy. There aren't many movies that I get excited about going to a theater for. I'm not a huge fan of theaters. I don't like to sit next to people. Don't like people. I like other artists. But like out in the public, meh. Okay, now this one gets a lot lighter. He's got the orange coming down here, so let's put the white first. I say white, but again, this is the unbleached titanium white. And there's going to be a harsh shadow coming through here. Let's go ahead and darken that up now. This is not the right color for the shadow. I'm going to have to definitely make that darker, but let's just go ahead and block in approximately where it is. I'm going to put the brush stroke across it once just to soften that edge so it's not that harsh. So did you see how this brush has some paint on it, not a lot, and I just ran it across once. I'm not going to go back and forth and blend it. I just don't want it to be that harsh. All of this up here is going to have to be a lot darker. And then this right now, he's going to get, this whole section is going to get a lot more, oops, dropping my brushes, is going to get a lot more detail in there because that's where the blotches of orange start coming in later. I'm not going to do that while it's wet into wet because I want that to be harsher. Okay, whoops, wrong brush. Let's go back to the unbleached titanium white. This is why I love acrylics. I mean, this is what, I think an 11 by 14, and look how quickly you can go through things. This and ink tints, I love how fast those mediums are. I think acrylic might even be faster. I'm going to wipe the paint off this brush because there's too much, and I want to smudge that wet into wet, but if I left how much paint I had on it, I would just be creating a muddy mess. It's like I don't have to rinse the brush. I just want to wipe some of the paint off so that I can then use that brush to blend out. Actually, this kind of curves around a bit more. Not dark enough, but whatever. Good enough for now. Okay. This actually all starts getting a lot darker than what I've got. So we'll just put that in there. And then I'm going to use this guy and just kind of smudge that around. There's hardly any paint on this. This is the unbleached titanium white brush. Just get that nice dark shadow. So I want to get some in here too. Just smudge that around. Oops, wrong brush. Now this brush here, it's another round. This is the Master's Touch round, which is the generic Hobby Lobby. It works fine. I mean, okay, the Simply Simmons one is a nicer brush, but the generic ones, it's a tack-on bristle. They're fine. The Simply Simmons are not expensive brushes either, so it's not like they're going to totally break the bank. I would say that the tip of them is a little bit nicer the Master's Touch. Oh, that's got a little bit too much magenta. Let's throw some more yellow in there. The Master's Touch one, it's like the point is a little bit sharper. So it just a little bit of a difference there. Oops, too much paint, so I'm going to wipe some of that paint off and now blend that into the wet paint that's already there. I'm going to pull that down though, because this whole area is much more in shadow. Let's blend that down. Maya said, I'm having trouble cleaning all the paint off the brush. I wipe it on a paper towel and rinse it with water, but there's always some paint left on it. Am I missing a step? When you're painting, it can have some paint on it. That's fine. But when you're cleaning your brushes at the end of the day, use a good brush cleaner. And I like to use fairly warm. They'll tell you not to use hot water because it can melt the glue in the bristles. I've never had that problem, but it does get the paint out better. So that may help you too at the end of the day. But for now, there's some paint in the brush still. That's okay. Hold on. Tell my husband I'm live streaming. He's been texting me. We've been arguing about, not argue, but I needed him to get me a new cable for my laptop so that I don't disconnect when I'm on Wi-Fi, and the one he got me is too short. He insists my room is not big enough for that to have been too short, and that it is the right size. And I sent him the picture. I'm like, you can see it doesn't reach. He says I'm doing it wrong. I'm like, it doesn't reach. So, oh my gosh, I'm going to turn off my phone in a second here. So yeah, that was, he's been texting me all day, just kind of being silly about that sort of thing. His thing, I guess I didn't respond to the Venom thing in time or enough. And he goes, said my silence spoke volumes. I'm live streaming. Stop texting me. She knows. Okay, I'm going to pull that up actually a little bit further. I'm going to let this whole, I want to be dark there. We'll just make that one. Okay, let's get in here. This is the last section. And then there's a deep shadow in here. So there's no way I'm going to get it dark enough with the paint I have out. Well, I mean, it's on my palette, but not on the brush. So we'll just throw that in. Just soften that a bit, and we'll come back to that. Now, I am going to go ahead and start putting the orange bits in here now. But I'm going to rinse. Let's see, we'll rinse that brush. And that needs to be more orange. I've got too much violet, so I'm going to rinse the brush off. And we will come through with this. Again, mostly yellow. Actually, I can just mostly pull yellow into what's already there. Let's see if that's going to be orangey enough. Yeah, that'll work. I just want to get a base. I can come back through with detail. Ooh, too yellow. Pull some red in. There we go. I want this rough look, but I have to be careful because the edges, if this is still wet, I'm going to get this wet into wet blending, and I want this to be kind of harsh. So I'm not going to put too much detail there. I just want to get a base of where those orange stripes go. You can see, not even close to being exact to the reference photo. I mean, they're in the right location, but the outside edge does not have to be exact here. Okay. Okay, we can leave him alone. Actually, I do want to fix this though. I mean, while I say I don't need it perfect, a little cleaner would be nice here. Okay. Oh, and here is a bit messy. Clean up that edge. Okay. So now we are on to the last pumpkin. Not that we're done with any of these, but just the last base. here's my white. Oop, too much water. Dry some of that off. Way too much water. Oh my gosh. I do that sometimes. I'll rinse the brush and forget there was that much water on it. Whoops. And we've got, oh, I'm gonna reload for shadows. So we've got the deeper shadow here. I'm gonna shadow out that way. Actually curves around that way. Soften that. And if I'm too dark, it's okay. I can come through and add highlights later. Like I said, it does not have to be perfect. I'm just starting to get my base of where my lights and darks go. Now here, this section has it's way brighter in through this area. I'm just going to blend that with the unbleached titanium white brush. There's too much paint on it. I'm going to wipe some of that off. The biggest thing I think a lot of people have problems with when blending wet into wet is over blending. You usually only need a couple of brush strokes blended. If you do those couple of brush strokes and it looks good, it's easy to go, okay, then blend more. If this looks good, more must be better. No, a couple brush strokes, stop. Don't overdo that. So we've got this highlighted area here. And that deeper shadow as it comes down that way. There's one line that way. And then I'm going to use the brush that I'm using for the unbleached titanium white. Just smudge out a little bit. This one has a deeper shadow on that outer one, so I'm going to put that in now, even though that's not technically the section I'm working on. And then here. And now we have our unbleached titanium white. I think another thing that a lot of people have problems with when working with acrylics or oils is not having enough paint on your brush. It is pretty rare that I've seen a newer student have too much paint. It's almost always not enough paint. They're afraid to make a mess and they just load a teeny tiny bit on their brush. Usually you need more. And while yes, there can be exceptions to that, most students, I would say, were too afraid to add enough. Tamara said she's still working on the first pumpkin. I paint faster than everybody does, so don't worry about that. If you can get the base layer on your first pumpkin, dry that, and that way when I go on to details, you can be at that stage, and then you can just finish the other pumpkins later. But that's pretty typical, and don't ever feel like you're not doing a good job if you don't paint as fast as me. I paint abnormally fast for most professional artists that I've worked with, like when I painted in person with people. They used to joke when I painted at that art party place where people would bring wine and drink while I taught them to finish a painting. And the other teachers there used to joke when we would do our sample projects that my videos weren't actually speed paintings, that's just actually how fast I painted. So I do know that I paint fast, but just don't let that ever make you feel like you're not going to be good or you're not good enough. The speed that you paint is no indication of how good you are or how good you will be. But yeah, just get that first pumpkin finished then if you're really having a hard time catching up. That way he's ready for the next step. And the more you paint, you will end up becoming faster. And that's true whether it's painting, colored pencil, whatever you're working in. That does speed up the more experience or more practice you have with it. I've had students complain because they felt that it was taking them too long and they wanted things done sooner. And it's like, well, you got to practice for that. You'll get there. Not that you were complaining about that. I've got a lot of shadows that need to go onto this guy, but we're going to let him dry for now. So we have the base of our 3 pumpkins. I'm going to use unbleached titanium white and some brown. Let's get these stems in. I'll just start with this guy. So I've got my highlights. Now I'm going to mix some brown into that. Ooh, that paint is too thick. Whoops. Actually, you know what? This one will be easier. I think I'm just going to paint it brown and then put highlights on top. Let's make it easier. And I don't want it to be too dark brown. I don't want it to just be lost in that background, but I do want it dark enough that when I come through with the white highlights or the unbleached titanium highlights that you'll be able to see them. I'll just paint them all brown. There's a little bit of unbleached titanium white on this brush, but not much. And we'll let that dry so that when I put the lines in with the unbleached titanium white, I don't want that to blend wet into wet. I want that to be a lot harsher. So we'll let that set. I'm going to rinse the brush. Actually, this is a good time. I'm going to take a quick, probably not even 5-minute break, and I will be right back. But we'll let this set. Actually, I'm going to dry it now. That way I can let it set and cool while I'm out of the room for a moment. Okay, and so it is 3:39 right now. So by 3:45, I will be back, probably sooner than that, but I'll be right back. I have returned with coffee. I don't know about you, but I am having a hard time keeping my eyes awake. Eyes awake? See, that's not even a sentence. You guys know what I mean. Let's see. Remember, as you're painting these, if you're having a hard time keeping up, they don't have to be perfect. The only thing that I would say you want to watch, keep those edges clean. The inside can be fairly messy at this stage anyway. We're going to be doing more detail on top of those, so I wouldn't spend too much time making every little thing perfect at this point. What you really want is those outer edges to be nice and clean. Even in mine, some of mine I need to clean up. Ooh, that one really needs some cleanup. But don't, I would say don't over, like, stress yourself on making it exact. I put 2 ice cubes in this, and it's still super hot. Maybe I should have put in 5. Too hot. But I really need caffeine now. See, you can tell, because I'm getting whiny. Very tired. Please don't spill. Okay. Let's see, rearrange a bit. Still have a minute and I'll get started, just in case anyone else had taken a break. Okay, let's see. So where do we want to start? We're coming back to this guy. I'm going to start working more on the shadows. So now I'm going to start mixing some brown into those shadows. I want to muddy it up a little bit. These are two kind of orangey, great for a base, not good for the deepest shadows. And that's kind of what I'm working on now. So I'm going to go back to applying the paint with that Simply Simmons round. And this is a number 6 round. And I'm going to end up smudging a lot of paint. Why are you out? You are not the one I'm going to smudge paint with. This one, let's see, what other brushes do I want out of here? I need to go shopping for more brushes. I'll get some thinking, oh, I'm going to try this and end up loving it. Now I need another one for my acrylic brushes. That's the one thing that I've been really liking going to Michael's for. Overall, their prices are going to cost more than like Hobby Lobby by usually a lot. But they have some brushes that Hobby Lobby doesn't. And while I love Hobby Lobby's generic brand, some of these Simply Simmons I'm in love with, and I need to go get more of. Random stories. Okay, tomorrow. Yes, I am definitely still recovering from travel. I have slept so much this week. Like, it's insane. I don't get that much sleep. Like, I'm not able to stay asleep long, and if I do, my back hurts. Oh, not this time. I am out. Like, I go to bed and I am out. I've been so tired. So yeah. And now it's like, I mean, early I'm wanting to take a nap. I shouldn't be taking a nap for another like 3 hours is my normal nap time. I call my old lady naps. But yeah, no, I am, by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I am ready to nap. Okay, I'm going to mix, let's see what color I'm going to go with. A little bit of black. I'm going to pull some of the magenta, some of the red. I just need to get a dark, nice, ooh, this is a nice rich color. I'm liking that. Let's see what this looks like on the canvas. So I know I need a deeper shadow here. Ooh, this is good. So the way that I mixed this color, now technically you can just use brown with a little bit of black if you want, but I mixed some of the, basically the orange color that I used. I just added the violet, yellow, and red. I just added a little bit of black to it. And I'm going to darken up a few areas. I'm not going everywhere. Notice that I'm not just getting carried away, and anywhere where there's a shadow, I'm putting that. I want to go in a few spots here and there. That's going to look way better than putting them everywhere. So I've got these deeper shadows in here, and this purpley, blackish, whatever muddy color I made is working perfectly. And this is the thing with color. So I didn't know if this was the color I was going to want. If it didn't look good, paint over it. Mix a new color. Like, it's not a big deal. Don't be afraid of color. Just experiment and see what happens. So this shadow, it is going to be darker here and along the edge, and it's just going to fade out. Actually, I don't even have to blend that. That's just fine how it is. I'm not pushing very hard, and then I've got a darker line right in between. But that was enough right there for that shadow. I'm actually going to put a bit of a deeper shadow on the stem even before I come in through with the titanium, unbleached titanium white. Got a deeper shadow right in here. Oops, too transparent, so I want to mix a little bit more of this color. And now this is a problem that a lot of people have. They're like, I can't mix the same color. It doesn't need to be the same color. I'm using the same colors on the palette. I mean, I'm not going to go grab a different red or a different yellow, but as long as you're using the same set of colors, close is good enough. Don't stress yourself out about these colors. Seriously, it's not as important as everyone wants to think it is. I'm going to throw that brush on the floor is what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to take this stiff brush that I've been using. I'm going to get it a little bit wet and then dry it off as much as possible. I'm probably going to be too wet to start with, but it'll make it blend a little bit easier. It's a little too dry. Oh, that's already drying, so that one's not going to blend. Get a shadow in through here. Now pay attention when you do blend it. I want this edge to be harsh right here. I want it to blend out this way. Now this is a big deal. The blending technique that I'm using right now, where I'm applying wet paint and using a dry brush to smudge it out, your first layer has to be dry all the way. Like has to be, I can't stress that enough, dry all the way. If it is not, you will lift off those previous colors. And it's especially a big deal too, the type of paint that you use. Like the Royal Langnickel, whatever it is one low Cornell paint. I think they had an acrylic paint. I don't know if they still do. Those paints would always lift no matter how dry they were. So some paints just don't work for this technique at all. The Liquitex works. Like any good brand is going to work. Golden's is going to work just fine. Like any good brand. I'm actually tempted to get some Golden's acrylics and try those. I like their airbrush paint. So I kind of want to give their acrylics a try. I know they're a little bit too glossy is my only thing, but they told me when I talked to the people who over at Golden's, they said if I mix it with matte medium, that will mattify it and then I won't have that gloss. So I kind of want to try and see if that would work for my techniques because they have some colors that I cannot get with Liquitex. And it's a really nice texture. Like I do like the Golden's paint for like final layers. I would say I like them a bit better than the Liquitex. I have all the Liquitex soft body, but I think the Golden's paint I like the texture of a little bit better than the Liquitex soft body or their heavy bodied paints. So I kind of want to give those a try. Maybe, we'll see. What'll happen, I can tell you right now, more likely than not, I'll go buy all of the paints and then still end up going back to my Liquitex basics. I've done that multiple times on different mediums. I also had some different, I think Golden's sent it to me. There was like one of their versions or someone they work with, one of their oil painting brands I want to give a try. I normally use Winsor or Newton, but I'm thinking I may try some of these other ones. So now I want to start creating a little bit of texture, and I can use this color in the shadows. Just a little bit of kind of this bumpy look. Don't need to go crazy with it, but a little. I don't want to pull this dark over here. This is too dark for really anything there. But that gives me this nice, like these deeper shadows. Clean that edge up here. I'm going to leave that pumpkin alone. So if you are still, you're behind and you're still working on it, just keep working on this pumpkin while I work on the other ones. You can come back and do those later. Let's see, this guy has a deep shadow from the stem over here. It's kind of rounded and then it thins out. I'm not in love with this stiff brush that I'm using. I have got to go get some more of those Simply Simmons stiff brushes. Like the shapes were just really nice. Got that deep shadow there. Don't want to soften it too much. And then this color actually is going to come out here. Now watch too, one of the things I remember kind of struggling with when I was younger is I wanted everything to have a really definite line. Like if you couldn't see the line, obviously I did it wrong. No, sometimes you want a line to fade out into the background. And this is definitely one of those cases. Here, this is standing out more than I want. I'm going to actually add a little bit more black to it. Let's darken this up and let that fade. So you can see the line, but it's not that bright. You don't always want everything super defined and super outlined. Tamara. I'm going to soften up the bottom shadow too. Well, this is all going to get pulled up, but let's see, we've got a deeper shadow here, a little bit here, and then again, I'm going to come back through with the unbleached titanium white on those stems, so those aren't done yet. Just got a shadow there. Oh, this guy was supposed to have some of the orange in here. I'm going to use this because we start getting these little dots and details in here. And the funny thing is these details, when you look at this pumpkin in person, he's currently decorating my mantle. This is actually green, but in this lighting, it's not green. So even though I know it's green, it wouldn't necessarily work with this to switch that to green with this lighting. So we'll start adding some of these dots and details with this same shadow color, just thicker. I'm not using as much water. Just kind of little dots and squiggles. Don't need them to be perfect. And I've still got to come back through and add orange anyway, so I guess I could wait on these dots and squiggles. Even though it's the right color, I've got to add all the orange. So let's actually do that first. I'm going to stop with this color. Tomorrow said she bought the ultrafine spray mister from Hobby Lobby. I didn't even know they had those. And it's the same as a spray bottle for a wedding. Same as a spray bottle for wedding and painting. Airbrush is still better. Okay, good to know. I feel like I should buy one just to show the difference in a video because people bring those up to me all the time and I'm not sure if some are just, maybe some are better than others. I don't know. But people ask me about those all the time and swear by them. But as somebody who's used the airbrush for so long, or even the cheapy airbrushes, I'm wondering if I will like them as much as they do. So I kind of want to buy one. Maybe I won't buy that one. Maybe I'll try a different one then. Good to know, though. I know, and I think like in every acrylic painting video that I do where I'm using the airbrush, somebody recommends those. And they may be, I mean, they may be still suitable, but I could definitely see, I can't imagine them being as good. So it sounds like your experience is pretty much what I expected from those. Going back over some of this orange too and just making it a little bit more bold. You want to watch when you start putting the spots and the details on here, you want variation. Remember, anything with nature, you're going to have variation. You don't want to just repeat the same pattern again and again and again. That is good to know. I will use, when I talk about, I'll probably try a different one than the Hobby Lobby one then tomorrow. And then when I review it, I'll mention that that was your experience with the Hobby Lobby one. Because that's really what I expected with those. Like, I don't see how they could be as fine as what an airbrush is going to do. Now these little lines and stuff, they're not exact to the reference photo. Don't need to be, but I'm kind of going close, mainly on the direction that they move, the approximate location. Mine are probably not going to have as many lines as what the reference photo has, but I still want to get that general feel. So I want to keep looking at the reference photo, even though I'm not copying it exactly. Now, there is nothing wrong with copying it exactly if that's something that you enjoy doing. I don't. If I can get away with going for close, I'm going to. I save the copying exactly more for when I work on portraits and animals and stuff that it really would make a difference. But something like this, really close is good enough to me. Yeah, and those bigger specks with those airbrushes, that's where the problem is, because you get one of those bigger specks and you blend it with the mop brush, which is what we're using it for, and it'll lift any of those specks and you have now a hole where that went. So it can, that would be a problem. I mean, that's why bigger spray bottles won't work. The only time I've used a bigger spray bottle is when I was working on a big wall mural. Then it really didn't matter because it was such a large area. But for canvas paintings, I just never liked those results. This will get some more shading too later, but let's just get the orange in for now. We went to the garden center on, what day was that? Tuesday. They had a sale on gardenias, which I'm in love with. So I got another gardenia. So that makes 3 for me now. If my camellia dies, it's so getting replaced with a camellia, or with a gardenia. Anyway, when we went, they had pumpkins that I had never even seen before. The variety of pumpkins and squashes that they had, they were some of them were really expensive. I stayed with some of these little ones to decorate with, but they had some really interesting, like if you're ever looking for a reference photo for some photos and you're willing to spend a little bit more for those pumpkins, man, were some of those interesting looking. I mean, I've seen variations when you go, different pumpkins and stuff at the grocery store, but the actual nursery, they really had a lot. There's some orange up on that stem. There's some on this one too. And this guy, while I'm thinking of it, warm it up a bit. So this will all be in shadow over there. So this is probably good enough for the orange detailing on him. Let that dry. I'll come on to the next one. I have not tried that brand Beck. So I'm going to rinse that brush and I'm going to go back to mixing my violet, black, and, well, all these colors over here. So we'll grab some of those, pull them over, add some black. Ooh, too much black. Mix a little off to the side. I got a little carried away there on that shadow color. There we go. Can you get anything on Amazon, Beck? That's where I usually, the low Cornell, Michael's used to have it. Hobby Lobbies, I don't like what they carry, and so now I just get it from Amazon or Dick Blick. Or Jerry's Artarama, I think, has it too. Yay, caffeine is cool enough to drink now. Maybe I'll stay awake for the rest of the live stream then. So there's that deeper shadow there. Got one here. Now, remember, you don't always have to blend everything out. It's so easy to think if you make a brush stroke, you have to blend. You don't. Sometimes the brush stroke by itself looks perfect. So don't get stuck in that mindset that every single thing has to be blended out. Yeah, that's the low Cornell is definitely my favorite. I like their brushes and I like their transfer paper. Now this one I'm going to blend just a bit. Soften that out. Yeah, actually the low Cornell rake brushes are some of my favorites too. They've got some really nice filberts. Like most of the, I don't think I've got any low Cornell brushes that I didn't love. I'm going to make my shadows a bit deeper than what they are in my reference photo just because I like that look. You don't have to if you don't want to. Are you glad I told you what you don't have to, like, that you can do whatever you want? That I gave you that permission? I apparently think I have more control over people than I actually do. Yeah, that would be terrible to fall asleep during a live stream. How embarrassing. I don't fall asleep in like I can't fall asleep on a plane because of my neck. I can't turn my head to the side really very well. And if it rests at all, I tried those neck pillows and stuff. It hurts too much, so I can never fall asleep in things like that. So I think I'm safe to not fall asleep on a live stream. I'll just be miserably tired and fumble all over my words really badly. And start doing things like calling purple green or zebras giraffes. Oh, I'm liking this contrast a lot. So I'm going to hype that up even more. Nice shadow over here. And I love this is a reference photo I took myself, and I love taking my own and then painting it because I'm not some amazing photographer. Like, I have no delusions there. But I can get enough of a photo that then, as you know, once the artist side kicks in, I can turn it into something that I like way better than that original reference photo. I do it all the time with the reference photos that I take for us. I mean, some of those photos, like, they wouldn't be things that I would make a poster out of necessarily. Sometimes they would, but most of the time I wouldn't. But I can turn it into artwork that looks a million times better. So if you've ever thought about taking your own reference photos, try it. Because you don't have to be a good photographer. You just need to get enough that you can see, you know, basically what you need to see for the artwork, but it doesn't have to be, you're going to make the artwork better ideally. I mean, to me, that's the point of using a reference photo, is to hopefully improve on it. And in this case, I'm liking this higher contrast a lot better than what I actually achieved in my reference photo. I spent hours looking for the perfect pumpkin reference photo that would be like doable in a few hours that we could do in a live stream, but still, you know, had the look that I wanted. Like, seriously, hours on Pixabay, just looking and looking and looking. Couldn't find anything. I found a few things that were neat, but not really what I was looking for. And finally, I just had to, like, why am I being lazy? Set up the camera, go take your own photo, and then you can get exactly what you want. And I still paint from other people's reference photos all the time, but sometimes you just can't find what you're looking for. Another thing, if you are going to take your own reference photos that I've learned, is don't try, like when I wanted to do nighttime photos, I would try to do a single, like put a high contrast light on one side and all dark in the other. Usually it looks better if you have multiple light sources, so like a slightly dimmer light over here, like 3 points usually of different light sources from different areas, and it tends to look a little bit better than having one single light source. That was a big mistake I made early on when I kept trying to make, I wonder if this is dry enough. I may be making a mistake. Oh no, it'll be okay. I can just blend in because I'm not using a blender on this, but I would try so hard to get this perfect setup, and the lighting was never right. And I didn't realize when photographers get these really cool night photos, usually, or like still life photos, usually there are multiple light sources. Like this one's dim, this one's really bright, that, you know, this one's farther away. Getting that, play around with the variation there. That was a big thing for me to learn. And it made all the difference. Like, I spent so much time trying to do still life. I tried to do a fruit setup once, and I spent all this money on all these fruits that I was never going to eat, but I really wanted to take this photo, and the lighting, because I was trying a single light source, it just never looked right. And I started the painting, but I didn't finish it. That was one of few times where I didn't finish a painting. There is too much black in this color. Let's dab that and soften it out. So here's an edge I want to be super harsh. So like where sometimes you want it to fade out, sometimes here's an area where I've got high contrast. I'm going to hype that up even more. And this edge needs to be softer, so I'm going to go right over it and just smudge that a bit. I just want a nice shadow right along that outer edge. Usually, like, and this isn't always going to be the case, but as kind of like a general rule that you can kind of be safe with, if you're going to have high contrast, so you've got the light up against dark, harsh line, let it be harsh. If you've got shadowed up against shadow, soften it, let it be nice and soft. So like in my case, I'm trying to look at the lighting in here. This was easier to do in person when I taught. But like, okay, right here. See how this is dark, my hair dark, this dark, the background dark? That can all kind of blend into each other. I don't need a harsh line. Whereas like my arm here, or I've got the highlight right here, that I might let, like, well, here, move into the dark. See how that highlight looks up against dark behind it, highlight here? That's going to be a harsher line. So that's kind of a general way to look at, do I want a harsh line here? Do I want a soft line here? If it's going to have high contrast here against the dark, let it be harsh. If it's going to be dark against dark, let it just kind of fade out a little bit. Don't worry about trying to make everything harsh, everything outlined. Okay. Now I am going to come through with a few other things, but I want to soften this a bit more. So we've got that nice soft transition. I am loving this combination of the purple, red, yellow, and black mixed together, which sounds like such a muddy mess. It is working perfectly for these shadows. Let's get a little bit more of a shadow here. Not too much. We've got that one. Okay, so now I'm going to start coming through with more of these dark bits. Technical term there. Got a definite shadow coming down in between. Let's go ahead and smudge that one out. So we don't want that to be too harsh. Actually, it pulls up this way a little bit more. If you're ever doing something with art and I say, don't, you hear anyone tell you, do this or don't do that, like never do this, never do that, but you did it and it looks good, do it your way. What works well for one person does not necessarily mean that's the only way or the only, that it's going to be perfect for everybody. If you found a method that works for you, even though somebody else is like, these colors never look good together, but you like it, go for it. The only exception for me to that is if you're making something so that it's not archival. I mean, that I think matters if it's something you're going to sell. If you're not going to sell it, it doesn't matter. But if you are going to sell it, then obviously you want to watch for that sort of thing. But other than that, if you're doing a color combination that you've heard me or somebody else tell you, never do this, it looks terrible or whatever. If it works for you and you like the results you're getting, it is okay. So like as I'm working through here, if you did something totally different, but you liked those results, that's fine. That's good. Go for it. We don't necessarily all want to look like, I'm going to show you what I know how to do, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way. Experiment, try different things. I'm not pushing very hard. I'm just getting the hint of some of these shadows in some of these. Again, going back to, we want variation. I'm actually going to put a bigger bit there and then smudge that up. So I've got that shadow on the bottom side. Okay, I'm going to come back through and start messing with highlights. And I may come back through with some of these shadows again, but actually, wait, was I done with this guy? I don't think I was done with this guy. Oh yeah, I was. Well, done enough. Okay, so wait, take it back. A little bit of rough shadow here. But see how when I just smudge that real quick, just a few brush strokes, don't overdo it. He definitely needs a few more shadows. And this is kind of more of a dry brush technique that I'm doing, the way I'm blending that one, the paint on my brush, the paint that I'm blending, everything's very dry, but that's because of the type of canvas that I'm working on, that Belgian linen, the way that when they're gessoed a certain way, paint glides in a way that it does not on other canvases. So you may want your brush to be slightly more wet than mine if you're not getting the results aren't coming out quite right. You just got to play with it. Test different things. If one way isn't working for you, try another one. Okay, so now these brushes, these are those stiff ones. I do a intentionally terrible job at cleaning these because I want them to be even more stiff. I like having variation because when they're new, they tend to be, this one's pretty good, pretty damaged, but when they're new, they're just a bit too soft, and when you don't clean them well, they come out even better. Okay, I'm going to use that same Simply Simmons round, And I'm going to start pulling just straight. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of white now. I don't use white often for highlights. Well, we'll come back to that. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's put the detail on the stem first. Oops, a little bit more water. That's starting to dry. Oh, too much water. Gonna add a few highlights here. If I'm too bright, I can glaze a little bit of brown over that later. Move on to the middle one. Oops, too much water there. How I can tell is it's getting translucent. This color, the unbleached titanium white, is very opaque. There's these little dots showing through because I've got too much water, almost like it's starting to run. Not the look I was going for. I'm going to stick my finger in that just to tone it down. Just a bit. And then the last guy. And then once these dots are done, I'm going to glaze more of a shadow over this half of this pumpkin. Is definitely too even as I move around. I may glaze a little over some of these too. We'll see. Too much water again. Tamara said, I know you're devoted to Fredrix, but just to mention, Hobby Lobby makes a watercolor canvas that has a great service. I'm using with this. Great service for learning. Don't recommend it for selling. I put holes through those because that's what Hobby Lobby canvases. You guys often hear me. I mean, I don't want to say this publicly, but you guys hear me say all the time, like I was using canvases and had problems with them. The canvases that I had problems with, Michael's generic, Hobby Lobby generic, Aaron Brothers generic. Like those, if I put a hole through a canvas, it was one of those, and the watercolor canvases from them are one of the worst. Their canvas boards are great for practice. Like they're fine for students to learn on, no problem there. But when you're creating work that you want to sell, let me tell you, it is heartbreaking when you put, 2 weeks of work into something and you get a hole in it because something barely touched it wrong. They're almost like the stretched canvases of the watercolor ones especially. I had it happen so many times that I finally was like, no more that, and then the warped canvas. So I would have students, because that's what they carried at Hobby Lobby, and that's one of the last places I was teaching in person. And they have these, they're smooth. I think it's got the green label. It's like a dark, almost black green label. They're ultra smooth. I don't think they call it ultra smooth. Maybe it's just smooth, but they're smooth as canvas. Digging through there, trying to find one that was not warped, or I'd buy one, it wasn't warped. I'd work on it for a while and the wood stretcher bars would start to warp. So I don't recommend them for selling artwork. You're right. They have a good surface. They're good for painting on. But for like when I wanted to sell something and it's warped or whatever problems I was having with it, it wasn't worth the trouble anymore. And I used those for years. I mean, they were in my budget. I could get a lot of painting done, and that was the only place. Like, I didn't know at the time we had Azel Art Supply, and that's where I started getting my Fredrix canvases. When I switched to those, night and day difference. All the problems I was having went away. And so this is why I turned into such like a salesperson for Fredrix, because I already had switched to them before I started working with them because of the problems I had with those generic ones. Aaron Brothers warped like crazy. Aaron Brothers was one that warped really bad. Michael's I just didn't like the tooth of, and they were warped. Dick Blick's, same thing, horribly warped canvas bars. We'd have times where the staples had gone all the way through and left a rip on the edge of the canvas. Like I had so many problems with so many of those canvases that I was just like, I'm done. I'm absolutely done with these problems, and that's where I switched. Azel Art Supply here. If you live in North Texas, they have a few locations, and their Fredrix canvases are always 50% off, and so I started buying those, and it was like, all my problems just got solved. So, I mean, the price was good because it was 50% off, so I was getting good prices. And yeah, it made a huge difference. Because, like I said, I was selling my work at the time, so I still am like, oh, I hope no one comes back with like a portrait they bought when I used those canvases. This is just titanium white. So that is why I switched. But yeah, for teaching, you're right. You can work on those if it's a good, or not teaching, for learning. If it's a good surface, yeah, the watercolor canvases are at Hobby Lobby. They've got a nice surface until you put a hole through it, or until they warp all to hell. They're smooth canvas. I really did like the texture of those. And then the smooth canvases from Hobby Lobby, one of the other problems that I had was it was like the people who made them, I don't know if they had oil on their hands or something, but when I'd go with acrylics, I would have like a dot where the paint wouldn't stick. Like there was oil on the canvas that I just opened. I hadn't touched that area of the canvas yet. It shouldn't have been a problem. And it happened like it would bead up, like it wouldn't set. I mean, it was like painting over something that was oil primed, even though the rest of the canvas was fine. I'd have dots that it was just like their standards are not super high. So while I like them for brushes, I won't use their paint, any of the generic paints. I will not use the paint. I will not use canvases. I won't use anything like any mixing mediums, anything that affects the artwork itself, because a lot of these companies, they're just trying to make the cheapest art supply and make the most profit. And I mean, I guess everybody's trying to make profit, but when it comes to the arts, I talked to, when I worked, we'll back up a little bit more, when I talked to the people who used to work, they don't work there anymore, at Hobby Lobby in the art supply section, they said this is the section, the art supply section loses them money because they're not making enough profit off of the items, and that's why they started making their own generic brand. Now, I'm hearing this from somebody else who works there, not like a higher up at Hobby Lobby, so take that for what you will, but I mean, that it makes sense where all these companies, Michaels, Hobby Lobby, all of them were making their own, Dick Blick does it, their own generic brand. Brushes, fine. Brushes don't ruin my artwork. A bad canvas does, bad paint does, and I don't trust long term what those supplies do, because they are just, I mean, like I said, everybody's trying to make a profit. I get that, but it seemed a little bit more with them, so I didn't really trust it. And then the experience I had with their canvases, I was just, so that's why you guys always hear me like, only Fredrix, that's the only one I trust at this point, because I just had so many bad experiences. Yeah, Lisa, these Simply Simmons, they're inexpensive. They work. I love that. Whoops. Can you use Fabriano watercolor for acrylic? Fabriano, oh, the paper? You'd have to prime it first. If you want to prime it first, then you can paint acrylic on that. Whoops. And scrolled too far. 1 second. Carla said, I like to order from Jerry's or Amazon. Can you recommend acrylic canvases that you can order online? Fredrix. I still do Fredrix. Dick Blick carries them. Sometimes you'll get them for good prices on Amazon, and then the next day you'll look and it's like 3 times what it's worth, so you always have to check your prices, but sometimes you'll get good deals on Amazon. But Dick Blick is my main thing. And tomorrow, don't feel bad about selling artwork on canvases like that. I did too. And now I cringe because I have some here that had warped over the years, and I'm like, ooh, I've sold some. I mean, if they're in a frame, if the person puts it in an open frame, they're really not going to warp. They're sealed down, no problem. But I've had some. They were ones I bought at Hobby Lobby. I mean, they twisted to where like it was flat in this corner twisted up and this corner twisted up, and these two were still flat. And I had to put it in a frame before I could sell it. I had to include the open frame, inserted it in so that it would flatten it back out. Like some of those warped bad. Beck said, I got a bunch of Fredrix canvas pads. Can I sand those down for a smoother surface? Probably. You need to tape it first and then do it and then sand it. I mean, it's going to be a lot harder because it's going to want to lift, but you could, definitely. But yeah, I've got plenty of artwork out there on canvases that I wouldn't use them again. Let's just say I learned. I mean, let's be fair. When I first started selling the paintings, I wasn't selling them for that much, so I don't feel super guilty because, like I said, once they're in an open frame, they'll be fine. But it's still, yeah, I just choose not to do it anymore. Okay, so I'm going to really hype up some of the contrast just a bit. I'm using titanium white just a little bit here. Not going to go crazy. Oh, I hear little birds out at the bird feeder. Oh, he's sitting on the balcony. It's so cute. Little tree chickens. Putting a bird feeder outside of my studio window has been wonderful. I mean, other than when I do voiceovers, if I record in the day, sometimes you guys are having to listen to wild tree chickens. But It's really entertaining to listen to. So just adding these little highlights here, kind of squiggly, getting a bit of texture on a few of these. This is what really I love. It just starts making things look really good. So now it looks shiny. Now, this is why I did not start with white, titanium white. If I start with titanium white, I can't go brighter from there. That and it'll look really flat. But I couldn't brighten that up. So starting with the unbleached titanium white, which is that cream color, now I can add these little bits of a highlight and brighten up. And it makes it just that little bit of shine. Not too much. That's the scary, or not the scary thing, but like the biggest warning is you start doing it, you're like, that looks so good, I'm going to do it everywhere. So don't overdo it, because then that kind of kills the fact that it looked good. It doesn't look so good anymore if you overdo it. Just a little bit. Like this section. Just a tiny bit right there. Not much. This one I'm going to brighten up a little bit more. A little bit more where the light is hitting it. And you can get creative with the lights you need. You don't need big, expensive studio lights for taking your own reference photos. The ones that you guys have seen me do, the one that I have, it's like this little, you can't see it here, but it's this little, it just clamps on. It was like $15 on Amazon. And it's an easy light. That's what I used for these. I took it out and clamped it onto my mantle by my fireplace, which was next to the table that I took the photo on, and it worked. And then I had lighting on other areas in the room, you know, so I had well, had multiple point lighting there. It wasn't even 3.0, it was more than that. But I had lighting, or just these cheap little whatever. You just want to play around with how close or how far away they are. Another thing that I really recommend is get yourself some reflectors. Those are also not terribly expensive. You'll get a pack. It comes like in a little disc size, like, well, depending on what size you get, but it'll have like gold or white reflectors, and you can adjust if you want cool light reflecting or warm light. And black, sometimes you'll need that just to get a bit of a shadow in an area that's getting too much of a highlight. I mean, you can really control a lot with those reflectors. That is a photography thing that's like on my must-have list. I use those a lot when I take still life photos. And if you can get interesting lighting, like I always thought still life was super boring. I didn't have much interest in it. But when you get like interesting lighting, harsh contrast with your lights and your darks and all of that, it really does make it more fun to paint and more interesting. But you've got to play around with your lighting to make it fun. A little bit of highlight here, not much. And then the third pumpkin, move my reference photo over. Chicken and Nugget are doing great. I had to do a bit of training when I got home from my parents. My husband takes his vacation when I'm gone. He takes vacation time at the same time as me, but then we don't spend it together because he's home taking care of all our critters. But they got so used to him being here when I got home, they were being obnoxious with their screaming, like nonstop all day to where I had to cover them. I'm like, our neighbors are going to complain. They are being horrible. So I had to get them used to being a little bit more calm in the day. And it took a couple of days, like really the first day. But I mean, it was just that nonstop squawk, 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 squawk. They wouldn't calm down because they thought if they kept doing it, sooner or later, Matt would go in with them. And when he went back to work, they weren't happy with that. So they are now getting back to being their normal, like, I mean, birds make noise, but they were bad after being used to having Matt home with them all the time for that week. So we're back to our normal happy chicken life. Nugget got a bigger cage recently, and so he's really enjoying that. He's a tiny bird, so the cage was a cockatiel cage, but it wasn't like a huge one. And he's so active in his cage, we finally got a cage that's as big as chickens, and he is all over that whole thing. He loves it. So I've never seen a bird use every square inch of their cage. For those of you who have birds, you know they usually stay on like the top half of the cage. They don't use the bottom half. Anything basically below their food dish they don't go to. Yeah, not Nugget. He is all over everything and plays with every single toy you give him. I've never had a bird that did quite to that extent. And I've had all kinds of bigger parrots and, you know, macaws. We've had everything. You know, when I was a kid, not as an adult. But yeah, so he's really happy with his new cage. It's really cute. So yes, long story short, they're doing great. I was a little afraid though when I came home and they were acting like so loud. I'm like, oh my gosh, we are going to get evicted because of the chickens being super obnoxious. They're good now though. Okay, so these are good. And what we're going to do now, I'm going to do a little bit more shading. And now I've also got to do some highlighting on the bottom side. If you look at your reference photo where the light is going to reflect, where we put, in this case, fireflies, we definitely need to have that light reflecting. And that's one of the things that I like so much about putting these fairy lights. And you can get fairy lights for so cheap. I just get them on Amazon. I have some that I keep in a jar that I only use for doing setups like this. Because then I don't have to take them apart from places I actually displaying them. But you wrap them around different things, flowers, lights, whatever, or flowers in this case, pumpkins, or whatever it is that you're doing as a still life. It gives you very interesting lighting where, like, if you look at that reference photo, there's a glow here where it's hitting. You've got a glow on this pumpkin here, and that's going to add a lot of interest. So it's kind of a nice little trick you can do to create more interesting lighting. But I definitely, in order to make this work, this guy needs to have some serious shadows. I need to let that dry for a second. And actually, I guess while that dries, I could start doing the fireflies. More coffee. Coffee is waking me up. That's my second cup today, though, which is scary. I normally can only handle 1 cup. Okay, too much information. You guys don't care. Let's see. I need, because I added the white, and I used a fair amount of water. I don't want to just jump into that shadow. I guess I could just use the hairdryer. Plug your ears. It's thin enough that it's going to dry faster with a hairdryer, but I use so much water, it's going to want to, it doesn't dry as fast in that sense. But once the hairdryer goes on, it goes pretty quick compared to putting really thick paint on there. Tamara said, a little off subject, but I wanted to ask you, how do you get the opening animation on your videos? Did someone do that for you? No, I do it myself. It's just, well, Chicken's the one that I use. The old one was a website. You can go to websites, look at video intros, like just do a search for that. I probably paid $5 or $10 for the old one that used to like come in with my logo, like do that little trinkly thing. And now I have Chicken, and I just use the video editor that pulls the title comes up that way. Okay. Let that, yeah, that I didn't do long enough. That canvas isn't super hot, so I can go ahead and do a bit of shading here. I'm actually going to switch to a larger brush for this. I'm going to use some violet. Let's tone it down with a bit of yellow so it's not super violet. Maybe a little bit of black too. I think I'm going to go a little, actually, let's go with brown. Muddy that up a bit more. And I want to keep it fairly translucent here. I put out that color and I didn't even end up using it. I could have. I mean, it would have worked for this. So I need, let's see if this is going to be too dark. Nope, we're good. Oh, this is really violet, but I kind of like it. So I think I'm going to put it on some of the other ones too, where I've got this deeper shadow. That's pretty. Wasn't planning on it being that violet, but I'm liking it. So I'm going to put it in some of the other ones. There we go. On the shadows. That's just a pretty rich color. I'm liking it on this. Wasn't my initial goal, but it works. This is why you always want to experiment, because you may come up with something then you're like, okay, that's kind of pink. I kind of like it though. You may want to go more orange. If I didn't like it, I could wipe this off. Like, it's not a big deal. You want to get over the fear of making a mistake, the fear of trying something and not liking it. If you don't like it, wipe it off or paint over it. Like, it's just not a big deal. But I'm liking that. That gives me, I'm calling it good. I'm almost tempted. You guys know, you've seen me do that before while I take the blue on the shadowed area. I'm tempted to outline part of this in blue. I maybe keep it easy though. I'm probably jumping ahead too long. We'll be here all night if I keep coming up with ideas. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. We are going to go ahead and start with fireflies. And this is so easy, actually. New transparent mixing white. Hold on. If I can find it. There we go. This is the Liquitex Heavy Body Transparent Mixing White that I'm using. I bought some soft body. I don't know where I put it. It's probably, I don't know. I rearranged my studio. I haven't figured out where everything is. I moved a few things that I'd lost, I should say. Okay, I'm going to start with this. Now, if you don't have this, you can just use the titanium white. It's just going to be a little bit more bold in how bright your outline is, but you can glaze over it. So like I said, I'm not copying this as lights. The lights work. You can do it as the string lights if you want to leave it that way. I want fireflies, because it's me. Maybe to you. Trying some different brushes here. Where did my stiff brush go? Oh, right in front of me. I am going to rinse just the tip of that off because if I still had black paint, which I did, that would have muddied that up. So I'm not going to worry about just the dot right now. All I'm going to do, this is again is the transparent mixing white, and I will glaze over it. I'm going to put them in about the same location. And then just smudge out that edge if it's too harsh. Although the transparent mixing white is light enough, you don't have to smudge as much. If you're using just your titanium white, if you don't have the transparent mixing white, then you may have to smudge just a bit more. I'm going to make this one go in front of the pumpkin a bit. I got a little bit out of control with how wide that is, so I will smudge it just to make it smaller. We've got one right about here. You can put yours wherever you want. You do not have to follow the reference photo if you think they'd look better in another location. You just want to keep in mind where I put these. One of the reasons I want to go with the reference photo, I can easily see where my highlights need to go because that's how it is on those pumpkins. Like I'm going to need an orange glow around a certain area because I know where that firefly is going to be. If your circle isn't perfectly round, one, it doesn't really matter that much, but you can correct it when you smudge out your edges. It'll, you can soften that out. This one, obviously, you're not seeing the part over the pumpkin just yet, but we'll throw that in there anyway. Now the part that I'm doing right now, basically what I'm doing is getting my outer glow. This isn't the brightest portion. This is actually going to be toned way down, but it gives me this nice, soft lighting, like glow around it. We've got, Carla, we've got the fireflies here. There's a trail by me, and it has a creek going through it. And with the fireflies like that, I guess the environment, we get a lot of them out here. I love seeing them. In California, where I'm from, we didn't, like, that's not something I ever saw except when you went to Disneyland on Pirates of the Caribbean. You saw the fake fireflies there. Like, that's as close to seeing a firefly as I had ever been before I moved to Texas. I love them. I'm going to go ahead and add another one here. So I'm going to add a few extra. Like those are the ones that I can see from, maybe another one back here. Let's see you. I'm just making some up here for the outer edges. Now my canvas is super tall. I can throw them up if I want. I'm going to keep mine closer to the pumpkin so my center of attention is here, but that's just personal preference. You can safely put them wherever you want. Just consider your balance, what's going to look good or what might be a bit too much. Okay, so I'm going to let those dry. And while those are drying, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the glaze where the orange is going to be, which will look a little bit weird at first. But once the fireflies go in, it'll make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to mix some more orange, the red and the yellow. Both of these colors are extremely translucent, so those will give me a nice glaze. Now this sort of glaze is the one thing that I actually do like the Liquitex, their orange for, the Liquitex Basics, because in that case, I want a super translucent look. I'm just going to smudge that out this way. I want it to be more of a hint, not like, whoa, that's orange. Let's see, let's give a little bit over here. I'll stop to put a highlight in this area, but we'll get the orange portion now. Not too many areas with this. A little bit under on the wood. Warm that up. I'm going to smudge that out a bit. Now here, the lighting around these fireflies, I'm going to actually add a bit of transparent mixing white to it. And I'll have to glaze over it, but this on its own isn't going to stand out enough. So I've got to add white to it. I may end up adding regular unbleached titanium white if I can't get this to stand out enough. Yeah, Carla, you're going to get hooked on all of the art supplies like I am. Seriously, there's so many that I get. Like every time, like when a company asks me, like with Pan Pastels was one, I didn't want to like Pan Pastels. I don't need another medium, and now I love them. So we'll add that to the list of things I use regularly and want to buy more of. Like I do that a lot with different markers. When I got the Winsor & Newton pigment markers, I was like, no, I'm not going to like these, so I'm safe. No, I loved them and I had to run out and buy hundreds of dollars worth of more. So yeah, it's art supplies. They are seriously addictive and expensive. And then it gets bad, like, I don't know about you, but then I'm like, well, now I want a new easel. Like, I always want something new with the art supply. Like, okay, I think I bought everything I need, or, well, okay, I have everything I need, but I think I bought everything I want, and then I'll find something new, so now I'm saving for a new easel, because the one I want's like $1,000. I don't know if I'm actually going to get that one. I like the idea of it. I don't like the idea of $1,000, even if I save for a while for it, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But, yeah, I'm going to add a bit of unbleached titanium white. This is it's not glowing enough. And then I'll glaze orange over it. I'm going to smudge that a bit. We're going to skip that shadow and come down here. Even with the transparent mixing white, I wasn't getting the glow under these to stand out enough on the wood. Now this is too much, but I'm going to come back through and glaze on top when it dries. That's funny, Beck. Yeah. Oh, the airbrush kit. The airbrush is probably one of the more expensive things to get started with. And the problem with airbrushing is, I mean, okay, I don't know of anyone who's actually gotten into it and didn't like it, but it's kind of scary because you have to invest a decent amount to even find out if you like it. Like with colored pencils, you can be like, okay, I'm going to buy 5 or 10 and then see if I like it. So you don't have to invest a ton of money to start with. But when you get into to airbrushing, you've got the compressor, you've got, like, you can't really do it a cheap way and find out if you really like it or not, which is kind of scary for sure. But I don't know of anyone who bought it and didn't like it. I know of people who bought it and then didn't use it that much, but not because they didn't like it, just because they, for whatever reason, didn't use it much. But I don't know I can't think of anyone who told me they just straight out didn't like it. I'm having fun with, I bought a bunch of new templates and stencils to use for the one, oh, this is still not going to be bright enough, the one that I'm currently working on, the roses, and testing this airbrush. So I bought a bunch of like French curves and stuff like that I'm excited to play with. I waited to finish the roses. I got to a stage where everything's just super fuzzy, so I needed some of those. So I waited till they came and then just, you put something to the side. This is why I always try to finish stuff before I move on to the next project, because once you put it onto the side, it's so easy to not pick it up that project right away. I'm determined to finish it though, so I have to get back to that. Okay, those are too bright right now. I'll glaze orange over it. It has to dry first. Carla, the heated board for colored pencil. You know, I haven't tried that yet because I use so many oil-based pencils. And I talked to Esther Roy about it, and she said, yeah, she didn't think it was going to be a real fit for how I work. And then I'm using the mineral spirits, and you don't want to heat that because that's flammable. So it didn't. She talked me out of it, which I was like, okay, I'm actually really impressed with her that she was honest and wasn't like, yeah, no, just go buy it. She was like, yeah, I don't think that you're going to like that. But yeah, the people who I've seen use it, they're really cool. I wanted to buy it just because I'm like, it's in Heart Supply, I don't own. But she convinced me. We interviewed her on the Colored Pencil podcast, and she was like, yeah, I don't think it's gonna work for how you work. Tamara said, I bought some new brushes and an Arches Aquarelle watercolor pad for the new Graphy Tint blocks I bought after your demo. God, aren't those things amazing? Have you played with them yet? I actually am really excited to do Graphy Tint again because of those blocks. I don't even use watercolor. Jenny said, I'm letting this dry, that's why I'm stopping to talk. Jenny said, yes, 18 months and many dollars later, and there are still things I want, but I have more than enough to keep going with. I have the Iwata Studio Series and the Neo airbrush. Yeah, I have the Neo Iwata. That's actually here. I put a different cap on it. I cleaned this. I can't wait to show you the video of how to properly clean an airbrush. I wasn't cleaning mine right. Like, all these years, I'm like, oh, it's clogged again. Oh, it's clogged again. Obviously, because you're not cleaning it right. Like, I watched some videos, and you can look them up on YouTube. I don't remember the names. They were older. They swear a lot. Some of the I don't know what it is with airbrushers on YouTube. Most of them don't make many videos, and there's like a lot of swearing. And look, I painted lady boobies. But it's yeah. Now that I know how to clean it, I have a feeling I'm gonna like that airbrush a whole lot better. Basically, the short version of it is you have to actually pull the whole thing apart and clean it really well and soak it like overnight in your airbrush cleaner. And I got things out of this airbrush, like I got it so clean. I can't believe it was working at all for how dirty it was when I cleaned it and soaked it like apparently you're supposed to. The amount of crap that came out of that airbrush, I had to do it for 2 days straight, and I just kept getting more and more and more. I'm like, no wonder it's always clogged. So yeah. Okay, this should be good. Now I'm going to do a glow, like just a little bit of a glow with the orange here. I've got a little bit of white mixed in, or of water mixed in with it. You could go more yellow if you want, and actually I think I'm going to on some of these. Let's go a little bit more yellow, a little bit less with the orange. Oop, too yellow. Need a little bit more orange. My yellow is too yellow. And now I can actually glaze this orange right over. I think I'm going to do more orange on the edges, but we can start with this yellowy bit first. Yeah, I'll be surprised if you don't like those Graphy Tint blocks tomorrow. They are so fun. It's so fast. Like, even if you just want to get a sketchy look, I did the Graphy Tint pencils, and you guys know I'd only done like 2 projects with them. They're okay, but I liked ink tints better because I had more colors and I just had more fun with ink tints. But now that I've got those blocks, I'm like, ooh, now it's fun. How did I not know? And I think that I blame Derwent's marketing on that, because I had no idea they existed until I was talking to the people when I demoed for Derwent a year and a half, 2 years ago. In Salt Lake City, and I was talking to him. I'm like, you really need to make block. I wish they had blocks like you do with the ink tints. She goes, we do. What? Yeah, they were called extra large graphite. What? Why? Or whatever the name was. I'm like, why wouldn't you just call them Graphy Tint blocks? I don't understand the marketing idea. Like, no one knows that product exists. Okay, so now I'm taking titanium white. I'm gonna put the highlight in there, and I'm just gonna smudge that with my finger so it's not too crazy, like bold. Just dab my finger on that. Get a little bit more. Oh, that's good to hear, Angie. See, I'm always hesitant to do much with airbrushing because people, every single time I use airbrushing, in a video, and especially with Patreon. And I understand where they're coming, people who comment on that are coming from, absolutely. But I get complaints of people, well, I don't have an airbrush, how do you do it without? So I've tried to do some videos to show you without that I can now refer you back to, like, okay, to get a bokeh background, here's a video, you can go watch for that. But I've been hesitant to do too much with airbrush because I was afraid there wouldn't be enough people who liked it. So I'm really glad to hear how many of you guys have said that you're looking forward to those videos. The airbrushing is a lot of fun. I mean, like anything, I'm going to switch from one medium to another constantly. I get bored if I use one thing too many times, so you don't have to worry about me switching to nonstop airbrushing. But it's kind of like, what did I do with the, when I posted the photo of the digital macaw? And people are like, well, I hope you still do traditional medium. Why would I give that up? It's just one more medium. I work in all the medium, or not all mediums, but I apparently like most of them. But yeah, I was hesitant to do much just because I didn't know if it would be worth it, if enough people would be interested. Here's the highlight that's reflecting off this little firefly back there. So I'm really happy to hear that feedback from you guys. And for those watching who are like, but I'm not going to airbrush, don't worry, it's not that often. And I'll still try to have those videos that show you how to do things without the airbrush. So try to make everybody happy. We just have to take turns on who's happy that week, I guess. I'm gonna make it a little bit brighter in the center of some of these more. Now my outer glow could even be more than what it is, so when it dries I may go back over that. I mean, you can go back and forth until you get it exactly how you like. Tamara says, yeah, I would love airbrush videos. It's been on my list of things to buy for my acrylic painting techniques, followed up by, besides, I still have some money left in my account. Oh gosh, you're just like me. That's frightening. I need to save up because I mean, we rent an apartment right now, and while I love living here, we're going to get priced out of it. We're not going to be able to afford to stay here forever because your rent goes up so much every year. Although this year they actually dropped it by $100. That was a weird situation, apparently. Anyway, they dropped it for a few people because I wanted to make sure people didn't move out, which is funny because I'm like, I was going to renew anyway, but okay, I'll take the discount. But normally, I mean, the apartments, the rent keeps going up and going up. So we need to buy a house, but I need to save money for that. And I keep spending all my money on art supplies. So I need to get under control and let some of that money stay in the account. Now, a couple of things that would make this possibly look very interesting is to go around with a light blue, kind of a reflection. And I'm tempted to do it just so you can see what it would look like. You can leave it here for sure. The light, I just love the look of, I'm trying to think, maybe I'll do like a grayish tone. I'm trying to think. I mean, technically, like I said, we can call this finished right here. You don't have to go further than this. But you know what? Let's see what happens. If I absolutely hate it, we'll just paint over it. I'll just try it on one little pumpkin and see what it looks like. I may hate it on this. We'll find out because I want this to be a fall feel painting, and if I add blue, it might not look super like fall. So let's find out. But this is the thing when you're talking about painting, you're always experiment. Always find out if you like, if you wonder what something looks like. Now, this is not the paint I meant to grab. To be sure, you can do it digitally. Like like you saw me do with that digital macaw painting. You don't have to start a painting from scratch. It's a good idea to test it on, like, take a photo of your artwork at this stage, and I could test that on my tablet or on my phone and see what it would look like if I added blue. But, we're here. I've got coffee in my system. Let's find out what happens. Okay, so this one's just a light, which color? I guess I can tell you what I'm using. This one is light blue permanent. That's the Liquitex Basics. Added a little bit of water, and I just want to get like a little, ooh, I think I'm going to like it. Oh yeah, this is nice because it's almost coming out when it goes up against the brown. It's kind of a grayish. So it's not super realistic, but it might add that little bit of interest that I feel like I'm missing. I like it. I don't even have to mix it with anything. I'm just using that. It's super light. let's see where some of these reflections go. I'm just basically where the reflection is on here, which is more of a golden color on my reference photo, I'm doing it in blue. I don't know. There's something about a blue, the blue on the shadowed area that I love, even if it doesn't call for it. I don't want to go everywhere. I'm just going to here and there. Because I don't want it to just look like I outlined everything in blue. But this is the thing. I mean, if I didn't try it, I wouldn't. I think that this adds something that I personally like. You may not. But if I didn't try it, I wouldn't know that. Like, be willing to take a risk. Don't be afraid of something going wrong and ruining something. Try it in one little area, or like I said, you can try it digitally. And if it doesn't look good, just paint over it. This would be so easy to change at this point and put the burgundy back over it. And it's not blue, like it's not super. Oh, that needs to be shadowed back there. What is going on here? That is way too bright. Oh, all this is drying. I have to mix a new batch. Way too bright back here. Oh, that is not even the right color either. I need more orange. Let's see, Beck, are there any airbrush kits, compressor brands to avoid, or are they all pretty good? Oh, I'm sure there are ones to avoid. I can only tell you what I've used, and I've been lucky in those, but I've had students who thought they were going to save money, bring stuff to class that was just an absolute, like, I mean, a good airbrush kit setup, you're looking about $400 to $500 to get started. That's a lot of friggin' money to get started on something. Now, it's not something you have to replace often. I mean, I've had my other compressor, I've had since, when did I get that? 1999. It's old. So it's not that you have to replace it all the time. I've had to replace a few parts here and there, but nothing major. I had students that showed up with kits that they got for like $50 on eBay. Now, $50 compared to $500, you can understand where you're not getting the same quality, and the compressor broke right away, or the airbrush needles were breaking. They didn't have replacement parts. Like, there were a lot of different things that went wrong in their compressors, or just simply didn't work. Now, from what I was reading about airbrushes, the main difference between a cheap one and a more expensive one is just that the cheap ones, after like 2 or 3 uses, the parts just start breaking. So it's a waste of money in that. The airbrush itself isn't that bad. Like the Iwata Neo, which normally has a bigger cut. Mine was trashed because I didn't clean it. But the Iwata Neo, you can get these at like Hobby Lobby. I want to say they were like $80 and use a 40% coupon. They may have changed the price. That's what it was when I bought it. So it wasn't expensive. It's the air compressor that costs more. Now, the Stormforce air compressor, I have it linked on my website. If you go to acrylic painting supplies, down at the bottom, I've got the airbrush supplies that I've been using. That one, I want to say it was like $280 or $300. I don't remember. Something like that on Hobby Lobby. But again, you can use the 40% coupon on that. So it really wasn't that crazy of a price. When you consider that. It was a lot cheaper than when I originally bought mine. So that is kind of nice if you're saving money that way. Oh, I'm really liking this blue. Wow, this just made it look so much better. At least I think it did. So yeah, that was, like I said, a lot of people, they'd get the new one or a cheap one, they'd review it on YouTube and be like, it's great. And then like 2 weeks later, or after they've used it a few times, like, yeah, it broke. So just be aware of that when you get the cheaper ones. So like Iwata, you're pretty safe with. Badger's a good brand. I'm using the Grex airbrush right now. This is the one I'm reviewing, and I'm torn on it. There are things that I love so much about it, and the one thing I don't like on that, for those of you who know airbrushing, so you've got push down controls how much air, pull back controls how much paint. So, or the other way around. I have to use it to remember. Apparently my brain doesn't remember. One or the other. One controls air, one controls paint. I think air, pressure, pushing down. The Grex, it's either up or down. You barely push and it just clicks down. You don't really have a lot of control, whereas the Iwata Neo, I've got I can control it that way. So I'm finding with the Grex, I'm having to control it by changing the PSI on my compressor. The Grex airbrush setup, that I spent an arm and a leg because I was dumb and I should have just bought the kit to start with. I would have saved money. And Hobby Lobby, all of those places, Michael's, they don't carry it. So you can't use a 40% coupon. So that's where that one's going to get more expensive. But it was, a little bit, no, I don't like that one. It definitely ended up costing me a lot. The compressor was like, it was under 300, I think. Was it under 200? I don't even remember. The airbrush was 140, and then I bought an add-on for it that was another 20, and then I bought a bunch of needles. Now the thing with the Grex airbrush that was really nice is that one airbrush has completely interchangeable parts. So like this one has a 0.3 needle. I have another airbrush that has a 0.5 that I almost never use, my Tamiya. And then the Grex, I can change out. I've got a 0.2, a 0.3, and a 0.5 in only one airbrush. They're interchangeable, all the needles. And so that's why it's like it costs a little bit more, but in the long run you save, because I've got 3 airbrushes in one. I just had to buy extra needle kits for it. So you've got, I mean, there are pros and cons to everything, of course, but that one I think in the long run is going to save me money because I don't have to have a whole bunch of airbrushes, but it's definitely a little bit more to get started with. And yeah, I'll do the full review eventually once I finish my rose painting with it. I chose a project. I probably should have chosen something that was not so advanced or elaborate. It's going to freaking take me forever. And I'm trying to resist. Like, I want to just grab my colored pencils to do the detail, and I'm trying to force myself to do most of it with just the airbrush. So it's taken me a bit longer. In the future, I'll probably just do mixed media, because that's how I like to work. The airbrush mixed with the colored pencils is wonderful. Let's see. Angie said, I have the IY Neo from Hobby Lobby, $49.99, not eligible for coupon, has a small and large cups. Yeah, see, they keep changing. Michael's just changed to where not everything's eligible for coupon now either. When I bought mine, it was. So, yeah, I can see, that doesn't surprise me. They're changing, which is kind of good. I hate that so many of these companies, they raise the prices on everything so you feel like you're getting a deal with that coupon. It's like, just put normal prices. Like, you're charging more than... That's one of the things I like about going to Dick Blick or Jerry's Artorama online, because they don't really do that 40. Well, some of them are. I think Jerry's was starting to have more of those online coupons, but yeah, I know that's a recent thing I just found out with Michael's, with changing their what was allowed to have a 40% or not. It was getting so ridiculous though, because you couldn't buy something if you didn't have a coupon, because you're paying too much for it otherwise, because their regular price was overpriced. So see, I started small, and I'm just going through now and adding a few areas that I think would look nice with more blue. And it doesn't, what I'm doing right now doesn't like make sense if you got into physics and the way light reflects here and there. I just think it looks nice. And for me, with art, there we go. That's probably good. I don't want to overdo, maybe a little bit more over here. It's so easy to be like, it looks good, add more, and then you cross that line of it looking good. I do want to add a little bit more of a reddish orange tint on the reflection under the fireflies, and then we can sign it and be done. Oh, I forgot to put a... Oh, no, that's just the reflection. That wasn't a... Wait. That was the reflection. That was the firefly. Whoops. Well, now that's the firefly. No, you're the reflection. I have to fix you. I don't like how the... I wasn't paying attention. You are a reflection, not a firefly. Stop trying to pretend you're something that you are not. You are the fire... Oops, too much paint. You are the fire... No, you're the firefly. I almost did it again. That's better. Yeah, I've had a hard time looking up reviews on airbrushes too, just because I don't know why there are not many good airbrushing tutorials. Like the only ones that I found that were very good, like that were actually completing, like, here's how to paint clouds, here's how to whatever, were like 5 years old. And for some reason, they all stopped making them. I don't know if just not enough people were into airbrushing or what happened there. And I was like, well, heck, then I'll make some myself. But I was hoping to find some to watch to get some tips for myself. And they're just, I just wasn't finding much. I mean, there was one guy who, he actually edited the video so it zoomed in on him when he burped. And I'm like, what are, okay, I guess that's what we're doing now. I'm going to add a little bit more of a yellow glow around some of these. Ooh, a little on the highlight too. But yeah, so I just found some really interesting and unfortunate videos. Maybe I just wasn't finding the good ones. Oops. Okay, so here's an example of a mistake. I had white paint. I accidentally touched it on my hand. Easy fix because I caught it before it started drying into a horrible mess. I'm just going to take a clean brush and erase it. Now that made a smudge. It looks like I made it worse. Nope. I'm just going to get my brush wet again because what's underneath is completely dry. So I'm going to dry the brush, rinse it out, do it again, and you just erase that. And problem solved, nothing is ruined. But you'll do that occasionally where, like in my case, I have it on my hand right here, and I just sat it on there, and that wasn't okay. So, yeah, that is it. And then now for when you sign your name, you can sign it. I sign mine with a liner brush, with a synthetic hog hair liner brush. Let me pull mine out. I'll show you how I do mine, and then I'll show you or tell you another way if you are not comfortable. Like if you have a hard time writing with a liner brush, because with a liner brush, you don't write it like you would with a pen or a pencil, where it's all in one movement. You write it to where it's, I'll show you first this way. If I can find my brushes. Where are my liner? No, that's not the one I want. Give me a second. I've lost my stuff. Not in that one. I might not have even pulled a liner brush over here today. I did not. Hold on. I have to go find a liner. How weird. I would have thought I'd pulled that out. 1 second and I'll show you. That'll work. This is a number 2 synthetic hog hair liner. So I'm going to draw this. I'm going to use unbleached titanium white. And then if it's too bright, I'm just going to glaze a color over when it dries. But I'm going to mix the paint in there with a liner brush. You're going to twist that with water so that it's all the way in there. Now mine has too much water. Let's get some of that off. Too much. Dab that a little bit on my paper towel. I'm going to do it in the bottom corner. And so you have to lift it. So it's like hoop, lift, another loop, lift, lift. See how it's all in all these different motions to get the shape. You can't just do it in one like L shape because the brush doesn't work that way. So I'm lifting as I work. Or as I draw it, write it, whatever. There's too much water on that, you can see, because it's starting to get really translucent. Okay, now if you are not comfortable writing, if that seems like it doesn't look quite right, or like you're not able to write that way, that does not look like an 8, that looks like a 2. Like me, because apparently I don't know how to draw numbers with this. Take your white charcoal pencil. You want to get the one by Generals is the one that I like. You would use that. You can write your name normally and then take your liner brush and trace what you wrote. That way it looks more like your name. Let it dry completely. I mean, more completely than you think it is dry completely, because I've messed this up a million times on my own. And then you just take a normal eraser and you can erase any of the charcoal lines that still show. Just make sure you really let that dry all the way. I cannot tell you how many times I thought it was dry, went over it, and smudged the signature. Now on this one, that's kind of really bright. It may not be a bad idea when it dries to go over it. Let's just do a quick glaze of one of the colors in the pumpkins. I don't like to, I wouldn't want to use bright red or bright green or something like that as a signature, because I want it to work with the rest of the painting. I don't want it to be something that you look at and you're like, oh, there's a signature. So in this case, that's kind of what's happening here, just being, even though it's the unbleached titanium white, it's still a little bright. So I may want to tone that down. I want you to see it, but I don't want that to be your focus. I want the focus to be whatever the rest of the painting was. But that is it, and I will get a good photo of this. I don't know what the lighting I'll see if I can get a good photo. I'm going to post a photo of my finished artwork over on Patreon, on this post on Patreon, so that you guys are able to see a little bit better what mine looked like, which actually looks like it's pretty close on the camera, but I'll still try to get a better photo that you can use if you need it. But thank you guys so much for joining today, and I hope that this helped you guys. Yeah, if you have future questions about this, if you're watching the replay, don't ask on YouTube, ask over on Patreon. I don't typically check the Patreon videos on YouTube, so I'm less likely to see that comment. Patreon, I try to keep up with. I miss some. Occasionally I'll find one that was from like 6 months ago, and I'm like, crap, I feel so mean, and like I ignored them, and it wasn't on purpose. Anyway, I am rambling because, yay, coffee, and I will see you guys. Well, next week we will have the oil painting frog, and then hopefully, if I can finish the airbrushing rose, we'll have that coming up. If not, I'll do something quick in between, just so that we have something. But anyway, thanks again for joining, and I will see you guys next time. Also, if you want to leave comments over on Patreon on which medium you would like to see next, it can't be oil because of the dry time, but next time we do one of the Patreon only live streams, let me know which medium you would like to see next time. Bye.